Meeting's now live.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Southern Planning Committee. I am David Evans, Chair of this committee. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being streamlined so members of the public will be able to hear the audio of the meeting and view the papers shown on screen. Should any committee member experience technical difficulties during the meeting, please contact the designated IT officer on the number you have already been given. Everyone is requested to mute their microphones unless asked to speak. Please only use the chat function to indicate the desire to speak, but nothing else, so that it is clear who is asking to speak and the debate has to be heard for those listening on audio feed. Members are asked to ensure they are present throughout the meeting, as you cannot vote on any item you have not heard all the debate of. As chairman, I interpreted the council's existing standing orders in the light of requirements of remote participation, with advice from the monitoring officer prior to making the rules. At the start of the meeting, I will ask members of the committee to confirm their presence and any disclosure of pecuniary interests. I will ask everyone to speak during the meeting, including members of the committee and officers, to introduce themselves each time before they speak. This is so those listening know who is speaking. Members are reminded to disclose any peculiar interest in any matter to be discussed which is not included in the register of interest, and leave the meeting by turning off their microphone and muting prior to being discussed. To read out members' names, as each of them confirm presence and confirm of any of their interests. David Evans, Chair and Councillor for Church Stretton. I have a pecuniary interest in item number 5, which is land south east of Church Stretton, Springbank Farm. David Turner.
Thank you, Chair. David Turner, member for Much Wenlock. I have no pecuniary interests, but I am a member of the Shropshire Hills AONB Partnership and the Shropshire Hills AONB Strategy and Performance Committee in respect of item number 5, but I have had no involvement in any comments about that planning application.
Thank you. Councillor Boddington, please.
No pecuniary interests and I'm present. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Simon Harris, please.
Hello, Simon Harris, councillor for Broseley in Shropshire, and I have no pecuniary interests.
Thank you. Councillor Nick Hidnick.
Councillor Nick Hignott, Ray Valley Ward, and no pecuniary interests.
Councillor Richard Huffer, I understand he sent his apologies. Is that correct? Okay. Councillor Cecilia Motley, please.
Councillor Cecilia Motley, Corvedale Division. Here I am, Chairman. I have no pecuniary interest of any kind. However, like Councillor Turner, I too am a member of the Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty Boards, Partnership and Strategy, and I've had no involvement whatever in this in item 5. But actually, could I ask that we make this a standing declaration at each meeting rather than having to declare it at every single one?
Okay, I'll take that up with Tim Ward. Councillor Tony Parsons, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, Councillor Tony Parsons, member for Basin Hill, Colham and Sutton, and I have no interest to declare.
Thank you. Councillor Madshainton, please.
Councillor Madshainton, Clibborn Mortimer Division. I am the local member for agenda item 8, and I've submitted my comments, but I shall be taking no part in the discussion. Thank you.
Councillor Robert Tyndall, please.
Thank you. I'm Councillor Robert Tyndall and I represent Brownclea Ward. And get a comment on 3 items. Item 5, like the other 2 councillors before me, Councillors Mockley and Turner, I too am on the A&B partnership, but have had no involvement in the application. Agenda item 7, I am the ward member. I have submitted a statement which I will read out and then I will take no further part in the discussion. And finally, item 8, my wife used to work for the sister organisation, the Old Vicarage in Stotterson, but I have not been involved in any matters relating to this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Tyndall. Councillor Tina Winwood, please.
Councillor Tina Woodward, Arveley and Claverley Division, no pecuniary interest, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Woodward. Please can the officers confirm their presence, please, and introduce yourselves. Planning officers, please.
Thank you, Chair. Richard Fortune, Principal Planner.
Andrew Chirikowski, Consultant Planner.
Thank you. Solicitor, please.
Kim Brown, Solicitor.
Thank you. Any committee officers or other officers, please?
Tracy Dog, Assistant Director, Economy and Place. Thank you, Chair.
Tracy, okay. Let's now turn to the agenda items. Apologies for absence, please.
Yes, Chair, we've received apologies for absence from Councillor Hoffer.
Thank you. Minutes of last meeting to confirm the meeting of the South Planning Committee held on the 19th of January 2021. I move the minutes previous Southern Planning meeting held on the 19th as circulated with the agenda papers to be signed as a correct record. Can I have a seconder, please?
Chair, can I second them, please, but with the proviso that on item 166 on page 3, I have mentioned this to the committee officer a bit earlier today, where it says in the bullet, it's the 3rd bullet point, Councillor Evans read the statement. In fact, I read my own statement, but with that proviso, I'm very happy to second your proposal.
Thank you. With those amendments, I will put that as a true record. Thank you. Committee officers, there are public questions, please.
No public questions, Chair.
Right. We've done a disclosure period pecuniary interest. Chairman, of returning substantive items will invite the planning officer to present them before dealing with the public questions part of the meeting and then ask the comments from members of the committee. At this stage, I will hand item 5 over to my Vice Chairman, Councillor David Turner, and he will take this application. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the proposed residential development at Springbank Farm. Therefore, would the planning officer introduce themselves and introduce this item, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, Andrew Chirikowski, Consultant Planner. I'll go to slides in just a second. Just before we do, I'll just draw members' attention to this schedule of additional letters, because I know if I don't do it now, I'll forget. Just on the first page, there are 3 additional items. There's a additional comment from the applicant's drainage consultant, which addresses the point in paragraph 4.7 where I indicated that there would be an update in relation to the drainage details on the site. Those have been provided, and the comments in response to that, those are set out there. In turn, the second additional comment there is from the council's drainage officer confirming that the submitted details that have come in are acceptable. And then finally, there's a comment from the council's tree officer who makes some additional comments in relation to the amended layout that's been submitted with the application, essentially commenting that it doesn't alter their views in terms of the advice that's set out in the report. I'll probably come back to those as I run through the slides, Chairman. If we can run through the slides. This is one of these applications that it's probably easiest just to explain this as we go through the slides. It's an application in outline. It initially came in for 6 dwellings. It's on a site which is about 200 metres north of the northern side of Church Stretton, and the development boundary for Church Stretton is more or less the line that you'll see along the bottom of the plan on the screen in front of you. So where we're talking about is on the north side of Church Stretton. The block of buildings you can see on the left-hand side of the screen there are the school at Church Stretton, and the access to the site is along the track to the north of the school. If Tim can point that out and run along the track for us to where the red line boundary begins, and then there's an access that will cut in around the existing dwelling at Springbank Farm, and then the site opens out to that roughly rectangular red-lined area you can see at the left, at the right-hand end of the screen, and that's where the main part of the development would be. The application, as I say, came in initially as an application for 6 dwellings. It's in outline, so there isn't a specific layout or details of design at this stage, but as you'll see, there are 2 indicative layout plans. So if we go on to the first of those, if we can go to the next slide, please, Tim. This is the original layout as it came in with the application for 6 houses, and I should stress it is indicative only, and it's only intended to be. Springbank Farm is if I can point you in the right direction, you can see there's a group of buildings to the north side of the site, and towards the left-hand end, that's where the main house is at Springbank Farm. And then what you have on the existing site is, if we move further to the right, Tim, there's a series of other buildings here, and actually on the site where the houses are shown, primarily consisting of a series of agricultural buildings, but there's also an area that's been used previously as a campsite. And then towards the right-hand end, above the red line boundary, you'll see there's an additional property there, Meadowbank, which, as I've set out in the report, was thought to be an agricultural building that dates from around about the 1880s, that's subsequently been converted into a dwelling and is now occupied as a residential dwelling. So it's a sort of fairly separate but self-contained little group of buildings. If we can move on to the next slide, if you just bear in mind what's on that slide at the moment in terms of layout, but it is indicative. The application was subsequently changed, in fact, only very recently, so that it's now only for 5 houses. The primary reason for this was that as the application has gone through the determination period, there were alterations had to be made to the drainage that was proposed on the site. It's because the water table on the site is actually relatively high, and it was appreciated that using soakaways on the site was not going to work, as I've set out in the report. So they've amended the layout and incorporated the pond you see at the right-hand end of the layout there, which will act as the initial point for the drainage scheme, and then that pond is then connected to a further pond which is off-site towards the top of the screen, which in turn then flows with an outfall to an adjacent drainage ditch. I should just add at this point that you'll appreciate from the number of the application that this application has been sitting around for some time. The primary reason for that was that it was submitted in 2018 as the local plan review was progressing, and essentially at the applicant's request, the application was held over and not determined pending progress with the local plan review. That's now reached the stage, as I've set out in the report, with the consultation process that started in July, where we're now moving towards examination. So they felt it's an appropriate time to bring forward the site bring forward the application for determination now. That's essentially why you've got an application in front of you now, which appears on the face of it to have been sitting on the shelf for a long time, but it's very much at the applicant's request. If we can move on to the next slide, please, Tim. If you just note the layout there, there's a number of trees that are incorporated into the layout and design. I'll come back to that issue in a minute. This is an aerial photograph which shows the site towards the right-hand side, but sort of on the upper middle area of the screen. I don't know if you can bring the cursor to that point. That's it there. Yeah, so you can see the application site is broadly that area that's delineated by the trees, and you can see just above those the agricultural buildings that are there, and then Meadowbank is just above those. That's right, and then Springbank Farm is to the left, and then you can see the access that runs up past the school. That photograph is very handy because what it shows you is what the position of the site is in relation to the boundary of the built development to Church Stretton, which is really the key issue in this application, as I've set out in the report. There's essentially a field between the site and the edge of the built-up area of Church Stretton. The development boundary for Church Stretton doesn't actually run along the edge of the built-up area, but you can see to the south of where the cursor is now, there's that, I suppose it's almost an octagonal shaped close. Can you bring the cursor down and to the right slightly, Tim? Yes, here. This is Lawley Close, and in fact the development boundary runs east-west more or less through the middle of that area, and then joins back up with the edge of the built-up area, runs over to the school, around the school, and then you can see to the north of the school there's a green field. I don't know if you can run the cursor up to that field to the north of the school, in this area there. That site there is one of the allocated housing sites in the existing SAMDEV, and the development boundary runs around and includes that field. So if you can just run along that boundary, Tim, then to the right and then down towards the school and down towards the edge, carry on down, and then down towards the edge of the built-up area, and then essentially across to Lawley Close. If members can follow that, that's more or less the line of the development boundary for the purposes of the development plan for Church Stretton. So you'll see immediately from that this site sits around about 200 metres outside the development boundary, and that's really the key issue here, that it is a site that is outside the development boundary. It doesn't form part of an allocated site. The application, as I've said, has been submitted at the time that we've been going through the local plan review process, and the applicant has been waiting really to see what transpires with that. As I've set out in the report, the situation that's unfolded over the last 18 months, 2 years, not only with the local plan review, but also in relation to the field to the north of the school, has been a key factor in that there's been an alternative, sorry, not an alternative, but an application for housing development on the allocated site, which I think has been on the cards for 2 or 3 years, which has finally fallen by the wayside and was withdrawn back in January. With the disappearance of that application, the field there essentially has ceased to be available as a potential development site. It's owned by the school, and there was going to be a deal done which related to the development of that site for approximately 50 houses and the transfer of the school playing fields to the area to the south of our current application site. That's all now ceased to be, essentially with the withdrawal of that application. So we've got a rather unusual set of circumstances here, where on the one hand we've had the local plan review ongoing in relation to where the future allocation should be in Church Stretton, but at the same time we've had this application which has fallen by the wayside, and with it effectively the future development of that site, of the allocated site that's there. What's now happened with the local plan review is that allocated, it's been proposed to take that allocated site out of the local plan. In fact, in the latest iteration of the local plan that went out to consultation in July, it's now proposed that there would be no allocated sites in Church Stretton. In what that then does in terms of the overall position, as I've set out in the report, is that the housing guideline figure for Church Stretton under the SAMDEV going forward to 2026 was for 370 houses over the planned period. And as I've set out in the commentary in the report, the position we're at the moment is that there's 275 completions and permissions that have been granted. So we're at a point where we're below the level of the housing guideline figure, and in that respect there's arguably a shortfall. But on the other hand, if you actually look at roughly where you'd expect the figures to be, as I've set out in the report, the position of 275 is roughly where you'd anticipate being now. But we do have this increasingly complicated position because of the ongoing local plan review, on the other hand, and the fact that the application for the school playing field site has now been withdrawn, and essentially that application is going to disappear. If we just carry on through the photographs for a moment, please, Tim. We go to the next photograph. Next slide. These are just photographs of the site. You'll see there are issues in the application relating to the trees on the site. We'll just run through these because it'll give you an idea of the site. You saw from the aerial photograph that the site is certainly ringed round the south and the east side by trees. There's a series of views here which are largely taken the western end of the site, just to give you an idea of what it's like. This is the very western end of the site, so the A49 is to the left of this picture, and also the Hereford Shrewsbury Railway line. And then we've got a series of fairly mature trees running around the eastern boundary, and just to the right of where we stand, where this photograph is taken, is where the pond that I showed you on the previous plan would be located. If we move on to the next slide, it pans round the site from right to left, looking up the site to the west, so it'll give you a fairly good idea. This is the view standing in the same position, just literally turned round, of Meadowbank, which, as I said, is the old agricultural building that's been converted into a dwelling. And if we just very slowly pan through the photographs, Tim, we'll gradually pan round to the right, and it'll give you a flavour of just what the site is right. So if we can move on to the next, so that's moving slightly round to the left, and you'll see there's a series of older buildings then which come into view. If we just move on to the next photograph, Tim. Yeah, just keep panning around. It just gives you a flavour. You can see from the photographs that the extent of the tree cover on the site. This has just moved very slightly further up the site. This is the main open area. This has now come up to the top, to the western end of the site, and is looking back to where the previous photographs are taken. And you'll see from this what the issue is in terms of the trees that are on the site. There's this large cypress lowlandi hedge down the southern boundary of the site, which I've commented on in the report, and those trees would have to come out. And these are just more of the older buildings. These would all be cleared away. If we just carry on, I think there's one more photograph. I think that's the last photograph. So that shows you the last photograph of the buildings. No, it's not the last photograph. There's a couple more. So that just shows you the site as you come into it. Just turning around, I think there's two more photographs. This one, which is the access in, and then this one is the view south towards Lawley Close. So that's the view across the field between the main part of the application site and Lawley Close. So this is that intervening field that separates the site from the boundary of Church Stretton. As I say, the issue here really is around the how to view the site in the context of SAMDEF policy MD3. Is this one of those sites where there's justification for looking for approval of the application on the basis of policy MD3 as a proposal that falls outside the application site? I've run through the arguments in some detail in the report. It's very much as I've set out in the report. There's really quite a complicated set of circumstances around this application because of the local plan review, because of the withdrawal of the previous application. But in essence, the conclusion here is that the site, although it's in a sustainable location, in that it's actually very close into the church, the centre of Church Stretton, and you can walk in within 5 minutes to the centre of Church Stretton. In that respect, it's not a bad location. It is clearly separated from the rest of the built-up area of Church Stretton. It's located in the AONB, and as I've set out in the report, one of the key points that's stressed in the MPPF is that great weight should be given to conserving and enhancing the landscape and the scenic beauty of the AONB. So that's an issue to which a lot of consideration has to be given. There's also the issue I've outlined that although we've essentially lost the allocated site here, which was for 50 odd houses, the allocation I think anticipated 37 houses. The proposal for 5 houses doesn't really make up for that loss. So the overall conclusion in terms of the advice you're being given here is that as development outside the development boundary in the AONB, although there are some benefits to this site in terms of its relatively sustainable location, those benefits don't outweigh the harm in terms of the impact on the open countryside and particularly the AONB. You'll see that makes up essentially the first reason for refusal. There are two other reasons for refusal included. One relates to the position in relation to the loss of trees, and I've set that out in some detail in relation to the comments from the council's tree officer, because there would be 60 odd trees lost on the site as a result of the development. And the advice from him is that because of the layout that's proposed, it would be very difficult to mitigate for that loss, particularly given that the proximity of the site in the AONB. And then in turn linked to that, there's an objection from the county ecologist because of the loss of habitat that goes with the loss of those trees. So in total, there's three reasons for refusal set out at the end of the report. I say it's an unusual application because of the circumstances related to the withdrawal of the application on the allocated site and the ongoing progress with the review of the local plan. But the recommendation overall is for refusal, Chairman, as set out in the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. There are three members who've indicated they want to speak, and it's too early for that. But however, one of them, Councillor Parsons, has got a question. I assume that this is a question regarding the report, Tony, rather than anything else.
Yes, I just want to be clear, because this sits outside of the boundary, as Andrew's identified. Is this the sort of site where we would allow development if it was for a particular purpose, such as affordable housing?
That's one of those questions. It's rather difficult to answer. Obviously, we've got the application in front of us here. If we had an application for affordable housing, then it's one of those things we would have to look at all the issues surrounding it as to whether or not this is one of those locations where we might grant permission for an exception site. We've certainly got places in the county where we've had circumstances that in terms of the juxtaposition of the site in relation to the boundary, where we have approved consents. I can think of one that's just been completed in Bishop's Castle, for example, very comparable in relation to the position of the boundary in Bishop's Castle to this site, which is on the northern side of Bishop's Castle, immediately adjacent to the boundary. So certainly we've had other sites in comparable circumstances where we've had proposals for affordable housing which we have approved, and they've been approved with officer recommendation on the basis that they are compliant.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. If you could, if we can now ask the solicitor to read out any statements in accordance with the revised procedure, I'd be grateful. And I understand that the local member, Councillor David Evans, wants to read his. So, Kim, I think we're in your hands now.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The first statement is from Bob Welch on behalf of the Church Stretton Town Council, who says, this application is scheduled to be heard in the South Area Planning Committee on February the 16th, with an officer recommendation to refuse the application. Having read the planning officer's comments, I am struck by their inconsistency with what planning officers have advised in relation to the now withdrawn planning application CSTRO 18 for more than 40 houses north of Church Stretton School, which was deemed acceptable in terms of its relationship to the development boundary, as well as access onto Shrewsbury Road. Another inconsistency is that Shropshire Council has long included in the local development plan land in the northeast corner of Springbank Farm, CST038. This site now provides the town's 1 hectare of employment land. The site being proposed for 5 houses lies to the southwest of this site, closer to the development boundary. This counters the argument that the proposed development of 5 houses is too divorced from the development boundary. The employment site would use the same access route to Shrewsbury Road as this proposed housing development. The planning officer acknowledges that some account can be taken of the emerging local plan, which has increased windfall housing requirement from 50 to 121 houses over the plan period. The housing needs survey undertaken by the Town Council last year identified a significant need for affordable housing for key workers, especially in the care sector. Windfall infill housing will not meet this need, which is why the Town Council is engaging with housing associations and local landowners to identify potential rural exception sites. As the last available land on the valley floor, Springbank Farm is a prime location for such a development. The trustee owners of Springbank Farm have already submitted outline plans for a housing development that would bridge the 200-metre gap between this proposed housing development and the Lee Gardens estate. Furthermore, the trustees have indicated that a rural exception site would be acceptable to them. Taking into account the ageing demographic of Church Stretton community, the Town Council is keen to promote family-sized housing in proximity to local schools, and Springbank Farm offers possibly the last such opportunity, combining private and social housing. This application would add to the mix. The Planning Committee is respectfully asked to take these matters into consideration when making their decision in relation to this proposed small-scale housing development, which has already been amended to take account of the Town Council's concerns. I attach some documents which may be of assistance to councillors, and I believe councillors have already received those documents, Chair. Okay, next is David Evans, who is local member, and as you stated, he'd like to read his own statement out.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, committee. Application number 18-01258 for outline planning at Springbank Farm. Both Councillor Lee Chapman and myself support this application. Church Stretton is in need of houses owing to the larger sites being withdrawn. The one site at the school where there's going to be a land swap with the school was taken out when the Church Stretton Academy was taken over by Bridge Nordic Academy. The field adjacent to this application site is being worked on at the moment to see if it can be brought forward for housing. That's the land between the site now and the Lawley site. The reason for supporting the site is because to fill the housing needs with the windfall site at Church Stretton, housing on this would be sit in the part of Church Stretton with no detrimental impact on the surrounding area or Church Stretton. The site is concealed and all the matters could be adhered to with conditions, and I ask members to support this application owing to housing needs and delegate any findings to the officers. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, David. If you could switch off your microphone now. Kim, I suspect you've got one more speaker.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Next is Stuart Thomas, agent on behalf of the applicant, who says, it is agreed by your officers that the site is in a highly sustainable location. It is within easy walking distance of the town centre and the school. The land has permission as a touring caravan site and is located immediately adjacent to the allocated employment site in the plan. The employment site remains an allocation in the emerging local plan, and this counters any suggestion that development of the site would be too divorced from the settlement. There can be no doubt that the intention of SAMDEV and indeed the desire of the Town Council is for the town to grow in this direction. Turning to housing numbers, there is an accepted shortfall in Church Stretton. This is compounded by the fact there are no proposed housing allocations in the local plan review. Accordingly, the town would be wholly reliant on windfall sites such as this to meet its housing requirement. The plan allows for windfall development to come forward both within and outside the development boundary, and this application is a perfect fit with policy MD3. In respect of trees, the bulk of trees to be removed from the site are Leylandi, which run along the southern boundary of the site. A minimum of 20 of these are to be removed as they are severely overgrown and in a dangerous condition. Behind these are mature alder and ash trees. These, together with the hedgerow along this boundary, will be protected and retained. Trees on the northern and eastern boundary will also be retained, and they would form a screen against the railway line. The remainder of the trees in the central area of the site were simply planted to demarcate the camping plots and are small and with no great value. There is ample room on the site to provide like-for-like compensation, and our amended plan provides substantial areas of new tree planting, as well as a landscaping schedule. These measures, together with the new planting and tree protection on site, would integrate the development into its landscape setting. Pictures of the existing trees on site are included at Appendix 1. The layout put forward is a concept plan only. We are entirely open-minded in exploring alternatives at reserved matters stage. The applicant is committed to developing a high-quality, low-impact development. At this stage, we would envisage a bespoke scheme with individual designs coming forward at reserved matters. Some initial ideas for use of materials and massing have been provided and are illustrated in Appendix 2. To conclude, this is a brownfield site sandwiched between allocated employment and housing land. The scheme is for 5 dwellings only, so there should be no concern about housing numbers or thresholds being exceeded to compromise the plan. We have satisfied all technical issues and there is support from the Town Council. Approval of the application does not set any form of undesirable precedent for the Council, and we would respectfully request that the application be approved. And that's all for the speakers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kim. We have 2 speakers that I can see at the moment, being Councillor Motley, Councillor Boddington. Councillor Motley, have I jumped ahead of myself? I'm not sure. No, I think we're okay. Councillor Motley, would you like to kick off, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. This is a bit of a conundrum of an application, isn't it? I can think of some locations where we would throw this out without so much as a by your leave, probably. But I do think that we're in a rather peculiar situation in Church Stretton, where rather than being inundated with housing in the new and upcoming local plan, actually they are being bereft of housing in the new local plan, having had 2 fairly large sites withdrawn, as far as I understand, because there's one at Snatchfield, as well as this one with involving the playing fields of the school. And so in a way that leaves Church Stretton somewhat exposed, and it means that it's going to have to find an awful lot of windfall sites to make up the difference, which is going to be difficult because windfalls are windfalls and you can't always rely on them to come forward. I think I am relatively persuaded by what various speakers have said, that this is a sustainable location, albeit within the AONB, but at the same time, the AONB encompasses the whole of Church Stretton. And I think we have to be a little bit careful about allowing AONB status to place unusual places like Church Stretton into a complete aspic, because there is always this issue of quality of land, even although it may be covered by the AONB, as it were, protection. So I think we have to look at each case as it comes along, which we always do anyway. And I think we have to make a judgment based on need. And it seems to me in this case that need has been proven. This is not a large application, it's for 5 houses. It appears to be near sustainable insofar as it's near designated employment land, and that's got to be helpful. And I think that it will at least go some way towards making an effort to meet the shortfall of housing in Church Stretton. So whilst if this were a site in other parts of the south, I could see myself, standing up firm against it. But I think we've got to be a little bit more flexible in this particular case. I don't like saying this very much. And therefore, I am prepared to support this application against the officer's recommendation, with all due respect to a very good report by Andrew Shirakowski.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Councillor Motley. We go on to Councillor Boddington, and then that'll be followed by Councillor Hignett and Councillor Harris. Councillor Boddington.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. In fact, Cecilia said much of what I wanted to say. This is a small application at the edge of a town that is quite accessible, and it is quite tucked away. It is not going to be a sort of foul development on the landscape, and I think in the circumstances I can see no reason for turning it down.
Thank you. Councillor Nick Hignett, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, admittedly, some of what I wanted to say has been said by previous speakers, but I do have a couple of points that I would just like to make. I think we're at a particularly difficult time for planning applications due to the fact that we're still going through the Section 19 consultation. And I know many developers are hoping for these local plans to go through without any problems, so that they can put their applications in. In fact, some already have. I'm uncertain myself how much credence we have to actually give to the emerging local plan, because that is quite an important aspect, particularly in this case. I know that the parish councils that I sit on wouldn't readily accept any housing outside of the development boundary. I mean, that's the whole point of a boundary, really. But having said that, I do agree that it's only a small site for 5 houses. It's close to further housing and amenities, which is in its favour. And just one quick point about leylandii trees. Personally, I hate them. I'd take out all the leylandii trees on any site, so I have no problem with those being removed. I think they're an awful blot on the landscape, personally. So I can see both sides of this argument, and I understand what previous speakers have said. And on balance, it's possibly an acceptable housing application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hignett. We've now got Councillor Simon Harris, Councillor Robert Tidnall, and Councillor Tony Parsons. So I'm going to ask Simon Harris to speak, and then I will speak. So don't forget, and then we'll move on. Councillor Harris, please.
Thank you, Vice. Just a couple of things. Making myself very aware of how the town and parish council feel about this. We sort of got into the same situation in Broseley, and where inevitably we ended up with a small development just outside of the planning boundary, and we are now altering the planning boundary to encompass it. It seems as though the town and parish council know their destiny and know what they want and know what they need to do to fulfill the town's needs. And as soon as they present that argument, I'm all in favour of things like this. We sit on the outside looking in from various towns and parishes from around the county to try and make judgment of it, whereas these people do know their town, do know their people, and do know what that town requires. So I have no doubt to support the town and parish council on this, and I will be voting for the development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. If I might just interject at this point, I'm going to be possibly unpopular in as much as I'm going to take a contrary view and support the officer recommendation. I mean, first of all, we're looking at the application before us, not at anything else. So, with the greatest respect to Councillor Parsons, what the attitude might be on an affordable site isn't particularly relevant in my view. Yeah. I think that planning policy have withdrawn the Snatchfield site in the full knowledge that the site next to the school is not available, and therefore must be persuaded that windfall sites will make up the difference up to the allocation. I think this is I think this is happening in Bishop's Castle as well. Yes, we've only got 275 either built or consented out of 370 target on the SAMDEV, but by the planning officer's admission, that is a situation which will remedy itself over time, and we do tend to find that windfall sites in a town of Church Stretton side do come along. Certainly my own experience is that you know, in much way not getting 10 a year fairly reliably. On top of that, the loss of trees and the habitat loss also concern me, and the location within the AONB. I understand Councillor Motley's concerns regarding the fact that the whole of Church Stretton is there, but it is a question of if this is consented, then where will it stop? There are a number of other sites, I'm sure, which are within a couple of 100 yards of the development boundary. Surely it's better to build within it rather than outside it. And on that note, I shall ask Councillor Robert Tyndall to speak, please. Councillor Tyndall?
Yeah, I'm just switching on my microphone. Bearing in mind that it is in the AONB, I think that if the committee decides to reject the planning officer's recommendation for refusal and instead goes for approval, I would like to see the reserved matters application coming to committee. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Tyndall. Councillor Parsons, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I still believe that, I might look more favourably on the development of this site if it was going to benefit local people looking to purchase their property within the Church Stretton area, which is a point that's been made by many of the previous councillors that have spoken on this point. Now, I recognise this is an outline plan, but if you look at the paper that Berries gave us yesterday as to what these houses may look like, they look like they're about £750,000 a piece. I don't think there'll be many local people able to afford that type of property. And so I would support the development of this site for affordable housing, but I'm afraid that I'm going to support the officer's recommendation that this site isn't approved at this point in time.
Thank you, Councillor Parsons. There is just a little bit of a side issue which I want to deal with before going any further. If you'll just bear with me. Kim, would you please take a look at the meeting chat?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not too sure. Tracy Dark, our Assistant Director, said that she'd like to speak as an officer.
Nothing personal, Tracy, but I'm just not terribly sure about the appropriateness of others getting involved at this stage. I'm a little uncertain, which is why I'd like to just have a bit of advice from Kim.
Yeah, I was just wondering in what capacity.
Well, Tracy, could you tell us in what capacity you wanted to?
Yes, thank you, Chair. In capacity as an officer of the council, so as a planning officer, so in support in terms of the comments that Andrew's made, and just to help to clarify and help the debate and discussion.
Well, can I just say, and thank you. Can I just say that Andrew is going to reply to some of the points? Can I ask Andrew to reply to the points, and then if there's anything you want to say, you can sweep up afterwards?
Certainly, Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Andrew, it's yours.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I was glad that was the conclusion you reached, because I thought it's probably appropriate for me to make my comments first, and then if Tracy wants to come back, it's probably suitable to follow on after that. Okay, I won't address all the points that have been raised, but there's a number there that it's just worth commenting on. I think the main sort of headline issue with this application is that there are an unusual set of circumstances here. I mean, you've probably sensed from the report and the way it's written and structured that there are issues that pull in different directions on this report. In that respect, it is a difficult application to do with the somewhat unique circumstances that we have around Church Stretton, and in that respect, I think the comments from all the members are very understandable, and I can certainly appreciate those, albeit I make the recommendation that I do. The second point I'd make, and I think, Chairman, you've actually raised this point yourself, is just to note that this application itself is not for affordable housing. It is for open market housing. So in that respect, it's an application that doesn't really fall within that discussion about the provision of affordable housing in Church Stretton. Thirdly, and again, this may feel a bit like I'm sort of seesawing slightly backwards and forwards, but it's just to illustrate the point that I don't think there's really any great disagreement in terms of the sustainability of the location. I think that Bob Welsh from the Parish Council has circulated with his document, with his submission, a document which summarises the sustainability appraisal, and you'll if members have looked at that, you'll see that it does actually rate the sites around Springfield Farm as good. I should stress on that's purely that process is purely to do with identifying the appropriateness of the whole range of sites that have been offered around Church Stretton, particularly in relation to their proximity to local services and facilities. But it's a fairly limited exercise, so it's something not to attach too much weight to, and it's a completely policy neutral assessment, so it doesn't take account at all of essentially the broader policy assessment that I've set out in the report. And as I say, the key issue here is that the site is outside the development boundary, and I think I can't remember which member actually made the point. The fact is that we do have boundaries there for a good reason, and they are intended to define limits to where development should go. The other point I was just going to pick up on, and several members have raised this point, is the site is in the AONB. There is the weight to be attached to protecting the AONB, as I've set out in the MPPF. It's one to which a high level of priority is given in the MPPF. I would say that if members do go down the route of deciding to approve the application, it does raise the issue of the reserve matters, and I think in particular it raises the issue of the design and layout of the development. So that's something we may want to come back to, just to ensure that we do get a reserve matters application that comes forward that is as appropriate as it can be. And you'll see in the report, although I've not in itself quoted it as a reason for refusal, but design has been raised as an issue, particularly both from a historic environment point of view, but also more broadly just in terms of a landscape and the AONB point of view. I don't want to lead you too far down that at the moment, because we haven't actually had a vote on the decision, but it's something to bear in mind, and obviously we'll have to come back to the issue of conditions and what other requirements are if there is a motion for approval. That's all I'll say, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Maybe the Assistant Director could now speak, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's just really to reinforce, and Andrew has covered some of the points that I wanted to say, but I think the starting position has to be the national policy, which is not in support of a site of this nature, and then our local plan, our adopted local plan of 2015, but also the current local plan that is moving through the process and is now at a stage where it has some weight. It doesn't have significant weight because it's not submitted yet, but it's important that it is up to the decision maker to decide that as well, of course. And I hear the comments that have been raised around the need locally. But we also do have policies that identify exception sites where need has been identified, and there is a well-trodden path around identifying exception sites, and there is a process for that as well. And it's really important that parish and town councils follow that process correctly, so that we get the right sites in the right location. And then finally, Chair, just to say that just some thought around precedent that this will set. So, why is this site different to many other beautiful locations as well in our district, and why is it appropriate to have development? And despite the design, because design can always be done in a beautiful way to try and reduce impact, it is about impact on that landscape. And I think it's just really it's just a word of caution around understanding the needs that the parish and town council are identifying, but just really a word of caution around the strong policy context that doesn't support this application. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that intervention, very helpful. And I'm of course sympathetic to it as well. We now have Councillor Harris, who's asked if he can make a proposal. And unless there's any other members who want to speak to the on the issue, I'll invite Councillor Harris to come forward, please.
Thank you, Chair, Vice. Yeah, I propose to support the application.
On what grounds?
On the grounds that although it is outside the planning boundary, the town council wish this proposal to go forward on the basis that they actually know what that town needs. And I just heard that the officer just talk about it. Is these people, it might not be setting a precedent, but I am aware that the officer did state that the town council wish the town, and of course it's the townspeople that elect that town council, to move the town in a development, using the subject of development, out of town in that direction. And to be honest, I fully agree. If that's what their proposal is, and then that is what should happen.
I think we might need a bit of policy around that. Do you have a second? Seems not. Do we have any other proposals?
Yes, I'll second that, Chairman.
Councillor Shinton.
Sorry, Councillor Matt Shinton, Clibbern Mortimer Division. I'll second that on basically on recognising that the local town council knows far better than we do what's actually needed there to move things along while we wait for our new local plan to come through. Windfall site, housing need, towns growing, and I will second that.
Right. I think that we might need a bit of help from both the solicitor and the planning officer. I can see that Andrew Szurakowski has said he'll comment, so good luck with that, Andrew.
Thank you, Chairman. No, it was to endorse the point you were making, Chairman. I think if we're going to have a justified reason for refusal, it needs to be built around policy. Despite the recommendation, you'll see what I've said in the report here. The discussion around policy really revolves around the interpretation of MD3 and whether or not there's a case that justifies need. There's a case that's justified in terms of the need around paragraph 2 in MD3. So if members are inclined to move towards approval of the application, my advice would be to look at it in terms of justification for the criteria set out in paragraph 2 of MD3 as I've set out in the report.
Thank you, Andrew.
I'm certainly happy with that, Chairman. Sorry to interject, but I got that written down but didn't say it.
Thank you, Councillor Shinton. Could the solicitor now speak, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say basically what Andrew's just said, that we had to justify the reasons, had to be around policy rather than just what the town council was desiring, and also just to remind members that the position, as Andrew set it out in his report, was that actually the development boundary, now that that site by the school's been taken out in the proposed local plan, in the local plan review, it was actually being drawn further back from this proposed development site rather than edging out towards it. And also that special consideration that needs to be given the great weight to the AONB, as set out in paragraph 172 of the MPPF.
Thank you, Kim. In that case, we have a proposer and a seconder. I'd like it to be very clear, very clear for members as to what the reasons are for a proposal which seeks to approve the application contrary to officer recommendation. So between Councillor Harris and planning officer, probably we could do with just a form of words, please.
Where's comments? Where's town council comments?
I don't know whether Councillor Harris has got any initial thoughts. I mean, my suggestion here is to look at paragraph 6.16, which sets out paragraph 2 of policy MD3 and the considerations that have to be taken into account, albeit the key relevant bit of paragraph MD3 is paragraph 3, which then refers back to paragraph 2. But those are essentially the considerations that you have to look at. So if the justification is going to be made, it's got to be made in relation to the increase in the numbers provided in relation to the housing guideline figure that's set out in the plan. The position, as I've set out, is that there's a housing guideline figure of 370 here. At the moment we're at around about 270, so the issue is whether or not essentially the need justifies approval of the application under policy MD3, because potentially there could be a shortfall, particularly given the fact we've
yes.
lost the site.
Andrew, you can see that. I'm very well aware of that.
Yeah.
It will be hard for this town to be able to produce the final figure unless small developments like this are allowed, and to allow the town, if it wants to alter its planning boundary, and that's the issue here, I think.
Councillor Harris, can I stop you, please? We're looking for wording for a motion, not the argument further. Can I please ask Councillor Tyndall, who's got a question for planning officer, to ask his question then?
Yes, can you hear me all right?
Perfectly.
Andrew, looking at MD3, which I've got open, and it's within the box of MD3. There's paragraph 3, which says where a settlement housing guideline appears unlikely to be met, additional sites outside the settlement development boundaries that accord with the settlement policy may be acceptable, subject to the considerations in paragraph 2 above. Is that
Correct.
what we're looking at?
Yeah, that's the key bit. Is the front line of the test is essentially that bit in paragraph 3, but then it refers you back to that list that's in paragraph 2.
Well, to help move this on, can I suggest that Simon Harris's proposal includes that? I mean, I can't word it for him, but that is the bit of the policy that I think he's using, whether he realizes it or not, to justify his recommendation for approval. Andrew, are you happy with that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there are, as I said in the report, and it's one of those reports where there are sort of swings and roundabouts to the argument. It is a relatively sustainable location. I mean, you can walk into centre of Church Stretton in 5 minutes. I've been and done it myself. You know, so there are other things you can add in there.
It's Chairman, if I don't want to milk this too far, but
good.
I think, all right, all I'm trying to say is that I'm not usually one for departing from policy, because that's what we have them for. And so if we can hang our coat on this particular hook, then I would be happy. Chairman, I'll shut up now. You'll be pleased to hear.
Thank you, Councillor Tyndall. Councillor Harris, if you'd both like to mute your microphones now. Can we please have some agreed wording then, in that case, please? Some clear wording from the planning officer and the solicitor, so we know exactly what we're voting on.
Chair, I'm inclined to suggest we word something along the lines of first taking paragraph 3 of MD3, that the current position, particularly given the loss of the allocated site, is that the housing guideline figure is unlikely to be met. I'm quoting re-quoting the wording that's used in paragraph 3 of MD3. Which then justifies approval of the application outside the settlement boundary, taking into account the considerations set out in paragraph 2, in that it would deliver additional housing in relation to the guideline figure, and the site benefits from a sustainable location in relation to the services and facilities in Church Stretton. Something along those lines, anyway.
Kim, are you happy with that?
We can refine.
Thank you, Chair. I think Simon Harris needs to be clear. I think Andrew's just tried to put it together, but Councillor Harris needs to be clear on how he thinks that those 5 bullet points are met in his proposal. So, for example, like Andrew was saying, that the location is sustainable in relation to services and amenities. It would add to the number of increased dwellings. Does he see any benefits arising from the development, or we just need to be clear on that level?
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Harris, can you react to that, please?
I can, yeah. 6.16, the increase in number of dwellings relative to the guideline. Yeah, I can't see a problem. Likelihood of delivery of outstanding permissions and the benefits arising from the development. Yes, I can see a lot of that seems to be the crux of it. Impacts of development. There's no impact. You've heard from a number of councillors that there's very likelihood of no impact, or very likely to be little impact, and the presumption in favour of sustainable development. You've heard already, David, that this is or can be classed as a sustainable development. So all 5 of those are met, in my opinion.
Councillor Shinton, any comments as a seconder?
Yes, I agree with that, Chair. It just seems to me that the original points I made, which is this is a windfall site, which is covered by 615, 616, and the whole of that. The only one that you could perhaps have a bit of a wobble on is 3, which is the benefits arising from the development. Well, for me, the benefits are the provision of housing in Church Stretton, of which the numbers are low, and we've lost 2 of the sites, as I understand it, being withdrawn. Where are we with this? I don't know.
Thank you, Councillor Shinton. I could say more, but I won't. On that basis, Kim, are we in a position to be able to take a vote? Because I don't want to do it on grounds which aren't clear to the members.
Yeah, I think as long as Andrew's happy with the reasoning, and can we also, it would need to include a delegation, obviously, to officers to include whatever relevant conditions are required. And also, I think in the report, the housing enabling said that there would be a liability for an affordable housing contribution. So in that regard, also there'd be needed a Section 106 agreement.
Would it be appropriate also to ask that this comes back to committee for the consideration of
reserved matters?
Reserved matters.
Thank you, Councillor Tyndall. Well done. Thank you. So yes, on that basis, Kim, can you take the vote? Can we take the vote and read out the committee member's name?
I think Andrew's just indicated that he'd like to comment first, Chair, if that's okay, please.
Oh, yeah, it's just to help members before they go into the vote. Really, I was going to just make the point that Kim's made, that obviously if the committee's minded to approve the application, then it would be appropriate to delegate the inclusion of appropriate conditions for an outline planning permission. There are a fairly set of standard conditions that we tend to put on proposals such as this. There would, as Kim said, also be this issue in this particular case of whether or not there's going to be a requirement for an affordable housing contribution. So as Kim has said, it would be appropriate to include in that delegation the sorting out the Section 106 agreement if that's required. It's not, we're in a slightly difficult position here in that we're not absolutely certain at this stage of whether or not the development would lead to the requirement for a Section 106 agreement for an affordable contribution, because it depends upon the amount of floor space that's created in the housing created. They'd have to actually be quite large houses to exceed the threshold, but it is a distinct possibility. So my advice would be, subject to any further advice from Kim, that it included in the delegation, it's the securing of the 106 agreement as well.
Thank you, Andrew. So we're now looking at a proposal to approve the planning application contrary to officer recommendations. Kim, will you please take the vote?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have a proposal and a seconder to go against the officer recommendation for refusal and to approve the application. Can I just remind members that only those members present for the whole of the application are able to take part in the vote? And I'll just run through each member's name, and if you could indicate whether you're voting for or against the proposal, please. Councillor Turner?
Against.
Councillor Boddington?
Abstain.
Councillor Harris?
I'm voting for my proposal.
Councillor Hignett?
For.
Councillor Motley?
For.
Councillor Parsons?
Against.
Councillor Shinton?
For.
Councillor Tyndall?
For.
And Councillor Woodward?
Against.
So that's 5 votes for, 3 against and 1 abstention.
In that case, the motion is carried. Thank you all very much. Thank you particularly to officers for their guidance on that quite difficult one. Councillor Evans, if he's there, can you come back and take the chair, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Turner. We now move on to item number 6, which is proposed residential development, land of east of Stoneleigh Close, Acton Burnell. So would the officer present the report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Richard Fortune, Principal Planner. This application relates to a commercial site on the edge of the village, which currently contains 2 workshop buildings and a yard area, the other with garden land, which forms the southern parcel of the site. The proposal is for redevelopment of the site for housing. And yes, so if we can move on to the next screen, first slide, please. This shows the position of the site on the edge of the village. Just to draw members' attention to the cluster of housing to the southwest of the site. If we look to the west of the site, we can see, yes, where the cursor is now. This is a group of housing which was approved in 2014 at a time when the council was unable to demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing land. And essentially, the scheme as built there is following the full details that came in 2017. So that is why that development has occurred. And as members can see, the access to that site is from the north, passing to the west of the building that's redlined within the application site here. And its access road comes around at the top edge of the site, again close to the upper part of the red line that we can see there. The scheme is for, if we can move to the next slide, please. As I say, it's an outline application. Next one then, please, could you on that, Tim? An outline application, but the actual siting of the building dwellings is a detail that would be fixed at the outline stage here, along with the access arrangements. With regard to the siting, the key points to look at here, this is the scheme that's an amended drawing that is written during the consideration of the application that has created a area of open space in the centre of the development, which I think members can see labelled there as a play area and open space, to address the open space policy requirements of policy examiner policy MD2. It also, in terms of access, it shows that the bulk of the housing would be accessed to the north off a relatively new spur road that serves is the only close road, private road there, with the existing yard access retained for the dwelling that is on plot 1, immediately to the north of the Radnors, as you can see on the plan there. So in terms of the overall site area, if we look at the top portion of the site, which includes effectively all the areas except that to the rear of Surrey Oak Cottage to the south, that area is the existing commercial yard depot site, whereas plots 7 and 8 to the south are actually area that is essentially got garden land associated with Surrey Oak Cottage. Now, with respect to the principle of development in this case, development planned housing policies are up to date due to the council's housing supply being well in excess of 5 years, and that can be given full weight. Now, Acton Burnell is not a settlement identified by the development plan as a community hub or cluster settlement, and therefore countryside policies apply to the village, which means that new build open market housing would not normally be permitted in this location. It's the applicant's case here that there will be community benefits arising from redevelopment of the site, removing the commercial site from the village. As the report sets out, it's currently used by a commercial vehicle body manufacturing company. And because there is essentially no controls over issues such as hours of working, noise regulation, or anything with respect to that site, they have proffered the view that the removal of that from the village will be a benefit to the result of the residential environment. The other aspect will be clearly in terms of with the existing commercial occupier moving out, the risk of the site becoming falling into disrepair. In terms of sort of looking at the application, we've sought views from our own economic development section, and they effectively do not consider the site due to its location in this village to be significant in employment terms, and they've raised no objections to its loss as an employment site. Officers accept that that this does constitute, in terms of the commercial yard and the building area, being previously developed land, and that there are no planning conditions limiting the commercial activity that could take place, and there could be this potential harm arising. So these are factors that would weigh in favour of the development. It's potentially a departure from the development plan. But where officers do have an issue is with the land at the southern end of the site, which we can see is labelled as plots 7 and 8 on the drawing before you, immediately to the rear of Surrey Cottage, with that essentially being land that is not currently used as part of the commercial yard. It would not meet the definition of previously developed land used in the National Planning Policy Framework. So it was suggested to the agents that areas should be omitted from the application. We're not proposing that that land should then become open space. It essentially would stay as garden land as per existing authorised use. But that has then been declined to make that amendment. So as it stands at the moment, officers feel that the scheme is presented for open market housing on this site by including essentially that the residential garden land doesn't really trigger or meet the justification for an approval as a departure from the development plan. If we could just perhaps move on with the slide, there are some photographs of the site which may assist members. Again, the left view again shows the existing buildings on the site and the nature of the hard surfaced area. The right-hand view gives us a glimpse of the green area, shall we say, that's not part of that commercial use. Next slides, please. Again, this is shots of the sort of young trees that are on that green area to the south of the site, where plots 7 and 8 are proposed to be. Next one, please. And again, some contrasted views of the site looking towards the entrance on the right, and again the area to the rear of the existing dwellings, which is intended to incorporate in the site. And just check there's another slide, please, Tim. And again, there's views of the site to the left, to the right. This hedging in this new section of road you just see in that corner is the road that snakes around the northern and western sides of the existing commercial site to serve that housing, which was approved in 2014. And so the next view, please. And again, another view showing that stonily close to the entrance. It's sort of centre of the site, essentially where the access would be into the this proposed site from the bulk of the housing that is being proposed. And just let us check, just see if there's no one's. That's okay. If we can just go back to the block plan drawing, then please, Tim. Right. Thank you. Yes. So it's only summaries, Chair. It's one where officers do see their arguments weighing in favour of the development were the proposed redevelopment contained solely to the commercial yard area and not incorporating the garden land, given the fact that this is a settlement that is not a community hub or cluster. Thank you, Chair.
David, you're on mute.
Has the solicitor got any speakers or statements you'd like to read on this application, please?
Thank you, Chair. But the first statement is from J. Long, Chair, on behalf of Acton Burnell, Frodsley, Pitchford, Ruckley and Langley Parish Council, who says Acton Burnell, Frodsley, Pitchford, Ruckley and Langley Parish Council understands that Shropshire Council is considering amending the site plan SA 36473 PL 03 revision G, published on the 23rd of December 2020 relating to the above proposed development. The PC is informed that this amendment would remove the 2 bungalows at the south end of the site and replace them with an enlarged play area. PC discussed this concept at its recent meeting on the 19th of January 2021 and unanimously voted to oppose any attempt to amend the existing site plan for the following reasons. 1. There is a great need for bungalows in the village, and there are already several elderly local residents interested in downsizing from their current homes, thus freeing up larger homes for families. 2. The relocation of the open space play area from the centre of the site to the edge would not only have a detrimental effect on the adjoining properties, many of whom have already expressed their opposition to the idea, but also reduce the visibility and therefore the oversight of the play area, which could lead to incidents of antisocial behaviour. And 3, talks are in their initial stages between the PC and Concord College for the co-development of a large children's play area, possibly to be sited on college land to the southwest of Hall Meadow. It is therefore requested that SC do not amend the existing site plan, which the PC fully supports. Next, we have Amy Henson, agent on behalf of the applicant, who states, "Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak on this application. The Albert Davis Yard has grown organically in Acton Burnell for many years and has an unrestricted commercial use that can operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The unrestricted use has the potential to cause detrimental impact upon the amenities of local residents in terms of highways movements from HGVs and the narrow roads that serve Acton Burnell, noise and disturbance. Following substantial growth, the Davis family chose to relocate their main business to a premises on the outskirts of Dorrington with direct access onto the A49. The applicant, Mr. Andrew Davis, and his family are a local family, having lived in Acton Burnell their whole lives. They are active members of the community and will continue to live in the village and board of the site. We have worked hard with the parish council and have produced a scheme providing an excellent mix of housing, 4, 3 and 2-bed properties, and this will be fixed at outline stage because scale is included for consideration. The inclusion of scale confirms the location of all the houses, particularly the bungalows, and their position in relation to neighbouring properties, and therefore the limited visual impact they will have. During the assessment of the application, planning officers encouraged us to provide an area of open space in the position where the bungalows are shown, currently land to the rear of Kerry Oak as a community benefit. Having considered this carefully, we would prefer to retain this area for the bungalows, the view being that they are single-storey and relatively well screened from the surrounding area. This view is supported by the parish council and discussed at their latest meeting. Parish Council have plans for a large play area in a more central location in the village and would not support a play area in this location. We have therefore provided a small play area within the centre of the site that is overlooked by the development and therefore safe for children to use in terms of natural surveillance. The bungalows are deemed to be a significant community benefit. There are very few in the area and there is already a growing list of people keen to occupy them. Furthermore, the list is growing with local people keen to occupy the 2-storey units. The proposal before you has the strong support of the parish council and local member. We have worked hard to produce a good mix of smaller sized houses which are lacking in rural villages and have included 2 bungalows as part of the offer, providing 10 units in total. The scheme includes an area of public open space within the centre of the site for use by not just the development but surrounding houses. This is a safe location and would be overlooked by the neighbouring houses. We very much hope that members can support the scheme and thank you again for your time. And that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anything from the local member? Or? Nope.
Nothing, no.
Okay. Does the chair, does the planning officer wish to come back with any details, please?
Thank you, Chair. Richard Fortune, Principal Planner. I think just to clarify, in terms of the comments being made as to what our wish would be with the southern part of the site where plots 7 and 8 are, which is indicated as being the bungalows in the development. The final point that's made in the officer report is we're not suggesting that that land should become the new play area or open space for the development. We're just suggesting that really that area should in itself not form part of the application site at all, because it is not previously developed land, and therefore the officers would be content with the layout of the remainder of the site with the play area that's indicated on that plan, essentially just to the left of the word, the Radnalls that we can see there. So it is that principle as to whether, in terms of accepting the departure argument here, to remove a non-conforming use and to reuse previously developed land, the officer views that should not spill out to then encompass effectively land which is not the same degree, well, it hasn't got commercial use. It is a situation where in a settlement like this, which is not part of a community hub or cluster, it is private residential land associated with existing dwellings, and that's how it should stay in the view of the officers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Chairman David Evans. I now open it up to members of the committee to speak. Have we any speakers, please?
Thank you, Chair. So yes, Councillor Tyndall has indicated he'd like to speak, please.
Councillor Robert Tyndall, please.
Thank you very much. Richard, I haven't quite caught which is the area that is covered by the which is in effect, I think, a brownfield site, and the bit that's actually open countryside. Can we just indicate that on the site plan?
Yes, Richard Fortune here, Principal Planner. Essentially, if we look at the plan before us, the area that we do not consider to constitute previously developed land is essentially that lower rectangle where the cursor is now, that contains plots 7 and 8. So essentially, everything to the north of those properties where the cursor is now, if the site boundary literally, Tim, back there, yes, literally drew a line across and joined those two connections, and it excluded that area to the south, then that would mean it would relate solely to the previously developed land.
In that case, Chairman, am I allowed to propose that we sorry, let me just think this through, that the committee approves the application subject to that land to the south being excluded?
Could I take all the other speakers first, and then we'll come to a decision after? Is that possible, please?
No, I just wanted to ask if that was possible. Not that I'm actually putting it forward, but am I allowed to make
yes.
a proposal? From a planning point of view, am I allowed to make a suggestion that if other members agree that we give planning permission, outline planning permission, but exclude the southerly part of the site?
We are allowed to do that, but I'd like to hear the rest of the members speak first and make that decision afterwards, if that's possible. Councillor Tyndall?
Of course, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, so did you want any further comments, Councillor Tyndall, on that?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
I think it's me, Chairman, Councillor Cecilia Motley, Corkdale. I'm rather confused about this whole thing. Acton Burnell is not a hub or a cluster. Therefore, in theory at least, it should be accepting only affordable houses. Am I right, wrong? What's going on? Is it because this is previously developed land that open market housing is being countenanced on this site? Could somebody please just clarify that for me? And if that's the case, fair enough. But I cannot see the justification for pulling into this what is effectively greenfield land as well. I think that's probably going over the top. But could that just be clarified, please? Because I am a bit confused about this.
Could you come back on that, Richard, please?
Certainly, Chair. Yeah, the applicants and agents are putting this forward as open market housing development as essentially, you know, the alternative to the existing commercial use. It's not been promoted as a wholly affordable housing development, although with 10 dwellings there would be a small contribution required. So in terms of the actual, yes, the impetus for the application is solely come from the applicant and agent. It is correct to say, yes, as a settlement that's not a community hub or cluster, we would normally only be countenancing potentially affordable housing where there's a clearly demonstrated need, but that's not what's before us at the moment. Whilst there's been reference to there being people of interest in occupation of the units, these are open market dwellings, and therefore there'll be no control over that as the application is submitted, as it is purely open market development, and it would not be possible to ensure in the grant of permission that it was only potentially could be acquired by whoever those local people are who've been mentioned.
Thank you.
And as I say, the point is we do have to look at the application that is before us. It is not a situation, I would suggest, just interjecting now, where the committee could resort to approve subject to the application site boundaries being altered or areas deleted. We need to assess what is before us.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, if I could just come back, I absolutely appreciate what you're saying, Richard, but I am puzzled by why an open market development is being put forward in a place where clearly there is not Hubble cluster status, and where clearly the rules say only affordable housing applications should come forward. That's the only point I was going to make. But I'm not going to carry on flogging that horse, so thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Councillor Shinton, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Matt Shinton, Clippery Division. I too was a little puzzled by this, but I understand that where the two bungalows are right at the south of the development, that land is in the ownership of the applicant anyway, if I've read the paperwork correctly. And if there's one thing I do understand is the need for bungalows, because my area is in the same position. We have lots of houses being built, whether they're affordable or for sale, but very little in the way of bungalows, which is what we have a lot of elderly people who would like to downsize and can't because they want to stay in the same area, because their care is here, etc., etc., etc. The play area, I'm always puzzled by this business of putting a bit of a play area somewhere, and why we should have to do that when there is obviously plans for a much larger play area in the vicinity. So I don't understand that point at all. The land is contaminated. The main business that was run there has moved elsewhere, and I suspect that as things progress with them at Dorrington, they will move off this land. And are we going to be left then with a bare, barren, contaminated ex-industrial site like we have in one or two other places in the south? That is not a good idea. So for me, the principle of this development of this site is a plus. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to come back, Richard, on that?
Yes, I would, Chair. Yes, in terms of the issue here, obviously, I could comment that the fact that this is not a community hub or cluster, clearly on that basis, the decision has been made in the current plan that over-market housing of any description is not appropriate here as new build. So, were it a community hub or cluster, there could have been development guidelines that specified the type of mix and housing that was being looked for, but that is not the case. With respect to the open space issue, we have to have regard to our own adopted policy MD2, which says, I just quoted to the committee, it says that adequate open space of at least 30 square metres per person is something that should be incorporated in developments. That is related on the basis of number of bedrooms in a scheme. So our policies do require that for effectively any scale of residential development, there should be some element of open space provided. And that is why it's been provided in this scheme here. It's in a location that's at the heart of the main body of development, therefore achieving the supervision, etc. We do not have a policy that says because it's 10 units or less that we can dispense with that policy requirement. So officers can only guide developers on what the adopted plan policies say, and that does indicate that there has to be a provision made on schemes of this nature, and that is on site. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Turner, please.
Thank you, Chairman. David Turner, Much Wenlock Division. Unusually, I'm not confused about either the application or the officer's recommendation, and I find myself pinching myself slightly in that respect. The parish council has presumably at some point chosen not to be a hub and cluster, and on that basis, it can't pick and choose, I don't think, about what development it might favour in this particular instance. I have the greatest sympathy for Councillor Shinton's desire for bungalows. I understand the point she makes, but policy conspires against this. We can only look at the application that's before us, as the planning officer said, and I'm therefore perfectly prepared to propose the recommendation to refuse the application and seek a seconder. Thank you.
I'm willing to speak here. Looking at the layout of the site, I like the layout. We've heard from the parish council, we've heard from the local member. Bungalows are required. I think looking at the layout of the site, I think perhaps these 2 bungalows will make the site viable if there's a lot of expense for groundwork and everything else. And the layout, I think, is fantastic. And the 2 bungalows in the bottom end of the site, I have no objection to whatsoever. And I would support this application if somebody wanted to propose it. So, and I'll leave it for there unless the committee have another go. So, Robert Tyndall, please. Councillor Tyndall.
Yes, I'm just about to. I would like to put an alternative proposal that we accept this proposal to build, with the exception of the area that is not brownfield site, because I think that goes against policy.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tony Parsons, please.
I'd like to second Councillor Turner's proposition that we support the officer's recommendations here for the reasons identified, and that we move to vote on that.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward, please.
Yeah, I was just going to second, obviously, Councillor Turner's proposal that we refuse, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Simon Harris. Councillor Simon Harris.
There you go. I find myself in a difficult situation here, knowing full well how this county as a whole is desperate for bungalows. It seems as if this planning committee is looking at something where you're going to end up with a patch of green space at the edge of a pretty looking development, and end up having another application coming in a couple of months' time for building consent on a patch of green land. Why don't we just get this whole application done and dusted and let the landowner get on with what he wants to do, which is supported by the town and parish council? I'm bemused by it all, really. That's all I have to say. Sorry.
So, were you seconding the proposal?
If Mad wants to propose it, I'll second it.
Madge, do you want to come back?
Yes, when I can get this microphone, I never know whether it's on or off. My God. Yes, because of the reasons that I gave, my concern is the development of an ex-industrial site, which I can see is going to be left abandoned. If we're going to develop that, for heaven's sake, let's develop what's needed in the parish and town council themselves. I understand about policy, I really do, but I'm having to say that some of these policies have come to the end of their usefulness in today's climate. And bearing in mind where we are with other things, which I'm not going to go down that path for health, etc., etc. So for me, the inclusion of the bungalows is an important part of this site. The play area, I make no apology for saying that I see it in my own village. They all congregate round where the big play area is. They don't stay in their own little bits on the various sites on the edge of Clibberry Mortimer. They're just left abandoned. The equipment's left abandoned. Who goes and checks that? I don't know. A problem for the future, perhaps. So I'm going to propose that we accept this application and include the 2 bungalows on the south end, on need, on reclaiming contaminated land, and issue a section 106 for an affordable housing contribution. I don't know the words. I'm sure you boys can put something much better than that, but that's the essence of what I'm proposing.
Okay. Councillor Harris, do you want to come back on that?
I second Madge.
Okay, any more speakers, please?
Okay, I've had indication from Richard Fortune he'd like to speak, please.
Right, Richard, yeah, I was going to come back to Richard anyway, so before we... Councillor Richard Fortune, please.
Thank you, Chair. Richard Fortune, Principal Planner. Just a comment before members do make a decision on this one. And I don't want to be sort of stating the obvious, but we do have to determine applications in accordance with the development plan unless there are other material considerations that override that principle. And as I say, I think just to reiterate that why officers have some difficulty here is that we shouldn't be giving the message that because, for example, we consider there's a need for bungalows in Shropshire, that anywhere potentially in the settlement can be potentially appropriate for that to happen, regardless of whether it's a community hub or cluster or not. We have to bear in mind that there is a settlement strategy that we got, which we got substantial backing in recent appeal decisions, some of which we'll come to later on this agenda, in terms of the strategy we have set out for web directing development across the county. And it is the fact that this settlement is chosen not to be a community hub or cluster in the current plan or the emerging plan. The only arguments we are having here is over the fact that if we accept there is a inappropriate extant commercial use in the site, and that we're looking to a way to effectively remove that non-conforming use, and residential is considered to be an appropriate option, that we should be essentially ensuring that if we are going to approve something as a departure, we are approving no more than is what is needed to deliver that goal of finding an alternative use for the previously developed land. I appreciate the members can have strong views on what accommodation is needed where across the county, and what's being offered here, but it is a situation where I think members need to be wary of taking a step beyond the principle of what is accepted as a departure, without then effectively that being embellished by further additions. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Do you want to come back, Kim, and anything?
No, I just reiterate what Richard was just saying about the fact that if we're accepting something, we need to still make sure that we're accepting something in line with policy and not creating a further problem, really. Councillor Tyndall's also indicated he'd like to make an observation, if that's okay, Chair.
Yeah, Councillor Tyndall, yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to say I don't suppose I'm going to get any backing for my suggestion that we allow housing on the area that is on the commercial premises, but not on the bit that's not, if you know what I mean. But there's no reason why those two bungalows can't go into the main site. I mean, they just show the bungalows at the bottom end. They could move up. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Tyndall. Anybody that wants to support Councillor Tyndall on this item, please? No? Okay. So, Councillor Chilton, do you still stand by your recommendation for approval, including the two bungalows?
I do.
Councillor Harris, are you still willing to second that proposal?
I am.
Right.
Excuse me, Chair, David Turner, Much Wenlock.
Yeah,
there is a proposal which I made, which was seconded. Thank you.
I was just about to say that, Councillor Turner. We've already got a proposal on the table for refusal, which Councillor Turner put forward.
Yeah, I was coming
seconded by Councillor Parsons.
I was coming back to that, yes.
Okay.
Right, so that was the first proposal. I have to take the second proposal first, don't I?
No, you need to take the first proposal first.
Okay, right. We have a proposer and a seconder for refusal application. Could I ask Kim to take the vote, please, on that?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, just to be clear then, so we've got a proposal to refuse the application in accordance with the officer recommendation for the reasons given. If I could just remind members that only those members present for the whole item can vote, and I'll just read out the members' names, and if you can indicate, please, whether you're voting for or against the proposal. Councillor Evans?
Against.
Councillor Turner?
For.
Councillor Boddington? Councillor Boddington, are you on mute?
For.
Councillor Harris?
Hang on.
Hello.
Councillor Harris?
Sorry, I'm voting for my seconded proposal.
So
Okay, we're just taking the vote here for the first proposal, which was to refuse the application. So if you could say whether you're voting for or against that proposal, please.
I'm voting to refuse the proposal.
Against the proposal then, Councillor Harris,
Yeah.
yes?
Yeah.
Councillor Hignett?
Against.
Councillor Motley?
For.
Councillor Parsons?
For.
Councillor Shinton?
Against.
Councillor Tyndall?
Was that me?
Yes, please, Councillor Tyndall.
For.
And Councillor Woodward?
For.
Four. And 4 votes against.
Okay, so the application is carried for refusal by 5 votes to 4.
6 votes to 4.
6 votes to 4, sorry. Okay, so that application is refused. Thank you. So there's no need to take the second vote because it's been loudly and said in the first one. So,
Chairman, it's come to that sort of time in the afternoon when I wouldn't mind a comfort break.
okay, we'll have a comfort break for where are we now? 1:45. 5 minutes would be plenty, I would think. So if you want to have
It should be for me.
I think it'd be for everybody. So we'll say 5 minutes comfort break. Thank you. Right, the 5 minutes is now up for resume. So we'll go to the item number 7 on the application form, which is Acton Armed Hotel, Moorville, near Bridge North. Thank you, Andrew.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, right. I'm afraid this is another housing numbers application, albeit hopefully it's a little bit simpler than the one earlier. Chair, yeah, this is an application to again, it's another outline planning application for 3 houses at the rear of the Acton Arms Hotel in Moorville. This is another application where it originally came in for six dwellings, seems to be the theme for me today, and then has been subsequently reduced to 3. So we started off with an application that was actually for more than was in this application, that was for more than is in the proposal on the table in front of you today. The report is hopefully is relatively straightforward. You'll see that in this application that really the key issue here is why there's a recommendation this time round for refusal on a site and for a development that has essentially been granted before. And the primary issue here is because there has been a significant change in the circumstances relating to the housing guideline figure and the number of completions and outstanding planning permissions. I'll come back to that first, but I think it might be useful if we run through the slides first. Well, maybe just before I do that, just alert you to the fact that there's one late late letter, which is coming from the applicant, which is on page. I'm trying to find my copy. Where is it? I think it's on page 7, isn't it? No, it's not. Where is it? Yeah, sorry, it's actually at the bottom of page 1. There we go. It's item number 7. Yeah, so there's a late letter been submitted by the applicant there, and I'll come back to that. Just to run through the slides then, the application site doesn't show very well, unfortunately, on this slide, but the site here is the site of the Acton Arms at Moorville. So running along that, yes, where the cursor is now is the main Bridge North to Shrewsbury Road. And at the bottom left-hand corner of the screen is where the Acton Arms pub is. I don't know whether you can see that on there, Tim. That's it. Yep. And then to the south of that, you've got the area. I'm sure you all drive past this fairly regularly, which is the car park. The pub has been shut for, I believe it's at least a couple of years now, and the proposal would be to put an access through the car park, and it's essentially, the application site is essentially the land to the rear of the pub, which you don't particularly notice when you actually drive past the site, but it's primarily because there's a number of trees there. When the application site was submitted, it included that area outlined in red there, and then if you can see the shaded grey area, which is on the right hand side of that site, that was the area that was included in the original application for 6 houses. And I think from memory, if we scroll through the slides, it'll show you both. I think there is a slide there which shows the original layout. So if we could just scroll through the slides, please, Tim. If we go through to the next slide. That's just the same. That actually, that's not the same layout. It's that actually shows the layout of the application as it is now, with the 3 houses, 3 detached houses with garages. I think we have got the slide which shows the original layout. If we can just scroll through. Bear in mind again, like the previous application I talked to you about, this is an outline application, so the layout is only indicative. This slide here actually shows the previous approval on this site, which was for, I believe it was for 6 houses, wasn't it? Which was approved, and the circumstances for the approval when this original consent went through was because the position then in relation to the housing guideline figure was somewhat different. At that time, there'd only actually been 2 completions. Moorville is a cluster settlement. And it has a housing guideline figure of 15, and at the time this application was approved, to say there'd only been 2 completions. There were a number of additional approved consents, but a very low rate of completions at that time. Hence the logic in actually approving the application. So that's the previously approved scheme you're looking at there. If we can scroll on to the next slide. mean, there's a series of photographs. These were just taken yesterday, so you'll probably mostly recognise this. So this is the main road through Moorville, within the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. The access into the site is right on the right-hand side. You can just see there's actually a concrete barrier across the road there at the moment, and then there's this substantial area of car parking. And the Acton Arms is on the left-hand side there. The application site is it's the area behind the pub. Yeah, that's it. So it's around those trees in the middle there, and then beyond that. Originally, the application did include the area to the right as well, but most of that, not all, some of it still stays in the application, but most of that is now gone. So if we can just scroll through the additional slides. I think the next one is the view looking straight into the access. Yeah, so that's the view. So if you can imagine, the access would go straight through. I mean, literally straight through. And you can see there's almost what appears to be a sort of gravel track at the back there, and the access would follow up there. And then the bulk of the site is round to the left behind the Acton Arms. And if we can go on to the next slide, please. This is actually, as you go through, this photograph is taken walking straight up that track, and as you get to the end, this actually shows the area that is there's essentially a large hedge and trees on the left-hand side here, and this is the area to the right, which is this is part of the area that's now been taken out of the application site. But there's an area here really directly in front of you that still remain part of the application, and the trees on the left would be taken out, and you'll see the comments in the report about there being a large ash tree in the centre of the site which would be removed, and that's essentially the trees to the left of this picture. And then if we go on to the next photograph, I think we'll go into the photograph of the site behind the pub, if you can move on. Yeah, so this is the view from the basically from the very rear of the site, looking back towards the Acton Arms. So you can see at the moment it's in a fairly sorry state. It's all fairly overgrown. It's a reasonably good sized site. You can just see the ash tree as the large tree on the left hand side there. And if we can just scroll on to the next slide. I think there's another view just looking the opposite way. And that just shows you the boundary. That's Priory Cottage, which is the building next door, and there's a new boundary fence being put in there. And I think there's one more slide. Yes, and that's just the view from the pub looking back. You can see it's a site that's quite well screened in terms of its setting in the wider landscape. It's a cluster settlement, so there's no defined settlement boundary, but the site does actually have quite well defined boundaries and wouldn't be particularly visible. The site itself, I don't know if we can just scroll back to the plan with the three houses on, Tim. Just to, that one there, yes, that one. The Moorville has a conservation area which covers most of the centre of Moorville, although the boundary, strangely enough, runs along the back of the pub and runs round this square. So where you've got the red line boundary directly behind the pub, that's the boundary of the conservation area, and then it goes up both sides of the site. So this site is effectively an exclusion from the conservation area other than the access, but it's surrounded on three sides by the conservation area. You'll see in the report there's reference to Moorville Hall, which is a Grade 1 listed building, and in St Gregory's Church, which are both to the off if you like, off the bottom left-hand corner of this map. They're both Grade 1 listed buildings, and Priory Cottage is also, which is the property to the northeast, is also a listed building. To come back to the substantive issues here, the application's been put forward. You'll see in the report the idea is from the applicant is essentially to develop the site to facilitate the reopening of the pub. However, there's been nothing as part of the application which proposes a link between the development of the site itself and the delivery of any betterment in relation to support for the reopening of the pub. Although you will now see in the additional representation that's been submitted by the applicant that they have late in the day come back and suggested a possibility for how that might be done. At this stage, it's put forward as a suggestion, but no more than that. The fundamental issue in terms of the recommendation that's been made, as I said, is that the housing guideline figures have changed substantially, and we're now in a position where, if I think the figures are actually set out on, it's actually page 56 of the report. So there have actually been, we're in a position now with a housing guideline figure that it's 15. We've had 16 completions, and then there's an additional 12 houses. So we're at I think that works out at 28. So we're very nearly twice the level of provision for the housing guideline figure. So that the position has changed very substantially, and in essence, that's the basis for the refusal of being recommended on the application. I think that's really the key issue the members will want to focus around in discussing the issue. There's obviously the matter of how the site is developed in relation to the pub, as proposed at the moment. There's no direct link proposed between the two, subject to the late representation that's been submitted by the applicant. That then raises the question of, well, does that potential betterment being offered by the site in order to enable the reopening of the pub justify approval of the application? And that's really the key issue at the moment. The recommendation, as I say, is set out in the report as it is at the moment, but I'm sure members will want to talk through that issue, and whether or not there in fact needs to be a tie between the development of the site and how the betterment from that is actually fed back into the pub. I'll leave it to that, Chair, and not make it too prolonged, but that's really the key issue here. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yep. Kim and Solicitor, are there any statements or public statements you wish to read out, please, on behalf of anyone?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The first one is from Christian Tim, who says, "My name is Christian Tim, and I wanted to lodge my support for the planning application. I have conditionally agreed with the owner for me to reopen the Acton Arms and run it as a pub. The pub has been closed for quite a long time and needs a considerable amount of money spending on it to bring it up to scratch. Whilst I'm confident I can make a great success of it, I will not take on the property without it being refurbished first, since the risks of doing so are too high. I really cannot see any harm in allowing the proposed houses to be built, but the benefits of doing so for the local community will be considerable. I would urge the committee to support this application." Next, Chair, Councillor Tyndall is local member, and he's written a statement which he'd like to read out himself.
Thank you, Councillor Tyndall.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. This application is within my electoral division, hence I'll not be able to participate in the debate or vote. I understand that there have been discussions between the applicant, the planning officers and Shropshire Council solicitors as to whether there could be a legally enforceable condition that the proceeds of the sale of the site, with the benefit of outline planning permission, if granted, must be used to refurbish the Acton Arms. The applicant has confirmed in an email to me that I think has been circulated to you that he's absolutely willing to enter into such an arrangement. As the officer's report understandably does not go into much detail about this possibility, I would like to suggest to fellow members of the committee that this application should be deferred to allow time to see if a legally enforceable condition that the proceeds of the sale of the 3 houses is used to refurbish the pub. Moreville Parish Council supports this approach, having previously been against the site because there was no link between the pub and the houses, but they have now supported the applicant wishing to use the proceeds to do up the pub. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Tyndall. Kim, Solicitor, any other speakers, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. James Collins on behalf of the applicant. My name is James Collins and I represent the applicant for the proposed 3 houses to the rear of the Acton Arms. We are a small commercial property company with a number of pubs which are let on a free of tie basis. The Acton Arms has been closed for over 2 years but used to be a very successful pub, and we believe with investment it can be again. We have a tenant ready and able to reopen the pub on the proviso that a programme of refurbishment is undertaken. The only way of paying for this is by the granting of planning permission for these houses on the rear of the site. Without this, there is no money to pay for the works and the pub will remain closed. We were very surprised and bitterly disappointed to find that the LPA had decided to recommend this application for refusal and taken so long to do so. However, it should be noted that when the development management report is read, it can be seen that there are very many reasons to support the application and only one reason to reject it. To begin with, the reasons to support, most importantly, it would ensure the pub could be reopened, but also the following extracts are taken directly from the report. The scheme would provide a small development of high quality new housing within the area of an existing sustainable settlement with good local amenities and connections. The scheme aims to create a new small neighbourhood with a distinct sense of place that reinforces local character and contributes positively to the existing community. The scheme would use well-defined boundaries to contain the development and existing hedgerows to soften the character of the scheme. The scheme would retain existing site features and have natural amenity and ecological benefits, such as the mature trees. The scheme would create an attractive environment with a more communal feel, not dominated by vehicles. The reason for rejection is that the LPA has given permission for too many houses in the parish since 2015 SAMDEV report. However, this exact site had permission for 6 houses up until March 2020. We are now only asking for half as many houses as were permitted less than 12 months ago. Furthermore, the reason for rejection states it would undermine other elements of the development strategy for the area such as to direct development to areas with greatest access to facilities. Without this development, then Moorville will not have a pub, perhaps one of its greatest social facilities, which is surely a greater harm. We would urge councillors to reflect on the logic of this application, that it had permission for twice as many houses less than a year ago, and that it offers the opportunity for the Acton Arms to reopen, with all the associated economic and social benefits this will bring. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That's all the statements and some speakers.
Yep,
David Evans, Chair. Does the planning officer wish to come by and clarify any points, please?
Not at this stage, Chair.
Thank you. I've got some speakers on this. I believe Councillor Cecilia Motley would like to speak first.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I was quite interested to know whether the Acton Arms was listed. I wonder if Andrew could just tell me. It doesn't make any mention of it, so I'm not sure.
No, I believe it's not.
It's not. Okay.
No, the property to the northeast and the properties over the road are listed, and the pub itself is actually in the conservation area. But as I understand it, the pub itself is not listed. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much, Chairman. If I could, there are a number of issues, it seems to me, with this application which we do need to take into account. The first is the fact that this cluster has vastly overshot its allocation of houses. I think the original allocation was stated at 15. It's now standing at 28. And despite the fact that there's an application on this site for 6 houses was agreed some time ago, that doesn't alter the fact that this cluster is completely over the top. We have had issues like this before with other clusters in other parts of the south of the county, and I think we've got to be very careful about encouraging cluster limits to just be burst through like this. The other thing is that, with the greatest respect to everybody, it is terribly easy to say that the houses need to be developed, and this application needs to be agreed in order, therefore, that the pub is going to be refurbished. But actually, if you think about it, the two don't necessarily follow on from each other. And I would quite like to know why the pub closed in the first place. If it's anything like other pubs, it's because basically, despite the fact that it was on a main road, despite the fact that it went through a period of being very well used, as I know myself, it obviously was losing it was losing business, and for some reason or another, it had to be closed down. So what is the guarantee here that there is going to be sufficient impetus behind this and support for this to revive the pub? These are awfully hard questions, and so many of us have had these dreadful situations in our own areas, and we've had to see pubs closing and unfortunately being turned into housing. There is a danger that the same thing will happen to this pub, and I just wonder whether the building of 3 houses is actually going to mitigate this. So I'm afraid I do have my doubts about this particular application, and I'm just going to wait and see what other people feel about it. Thank you.
Councillor David Turner, please.
Thank you, Chairman. David Turner, Much Wenlock. Councillor Motley won't have to wait too long to know what other members think, because I agree. My thoughts are quite closely aligned to hers. First of all, in terms of the housing guidelines, we're in a similar situation to the previous application, Acton Burnell, where you have a guideline and the parish council then wants to breach it at a point when we, as Councillor Motley said, we've got double the numbers for a particular reason. Now then, there are few keener supporters of the unlicensed trade than myself, but I, like many others, have not frequented public houses much in the course of the last 11 months. In fact, I think only once or twice. Life has changed. That's the first thing. Life has undoubtedly changed and will not go back to where we were at the end of 2019. This pub was closed on a number of occasions, or more accurately, was closed for considerable periods of time prior to the pandemic onset, and was opened briefly on a few occasions. My concern, and I mean, I really, from the point of view of the people of Moreville and the surrounding area, I would very much like there to be a pub in the community. But my concern is that money alone is not necessarily a reason for the success of a public house or hotel, albeit it's on a main road. And we've seen, you've only got to think about the times we've been on the planning site visit bus and gone past pubs which have got famous names but haven't been open for years. So I'm concerned about that. I have a good deal of sympathy with the point of view advanced by Councillor Tyndall, and I have to say that's a situation that's grown on me in the last 48 hours, because if there is the slightest possibility of being able to link the successful relaunch of this public house on the back of 3 new houses, then I think it's worth exploring. And I'm rarely a keen supporter of deferral of planning applications, but the suggestion that's come forward in the last few days clearly has overtaken the agenda, and on that basis, I think it's probably worth going away and looking at it afresh and asking the applicant to bring it back at a future date. If it isn't a question of deferral, then I would be supporting the application, which I think is for, I've lost my thread now, but I would be turning the application down. So my view is that we should defer the application, and I'm going to propose that we defer the application for a better constructed proposal, which provides some assurance that not only will money go into the pub, but the pub will thrive as a result. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Councillor Manshinton, please. Councillor Shinton.
What's the matter with that thing? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, thank God. Yeah, mutter. Sorry about that. I have some sympathy with what Councillor Turner has just said. I looked at this and thought the similarity to the Pheasant at Newington, which has been such a successful project. Someone before all the pubs closed down frequented it now and then, and with not the advantages of being on a main road like this one is, but has been enormously successful. So if there is some way that further talk, negotiations, whatever you want to call it, will manage to succeed in those houses, funding and being able to open the Acton Arms again, then I would support that. So for me, the Neenton is a real success and something that is a little bit beyond the normal imagination, and I would look to see something along those lines. So if Councillor Turner is suggesting deferral that we could examine along those lines, I'd happily support that. From a tree point of view at the back, yes, we really don't want to leave mouldering trees just sitting there on a piece of wasteland. I know it's wonderful for the environment, but I'm not at all sure that I agree with that bit either. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Simon Harris, please. Simon Harris.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Put my camera on. I like Madge, took great ease in the reflection on the fact that it mirrors sort of Neenton and the Pheasant Pub. That is an extreme success, and of course this one is slightly different. Neenton has rentable, affordable homes on its back. It would have been nice to see that if it was rentable, affordable homes on the back of this pub, it would have made me feel a lot more at ease. And this is why I do think that if the legal side of it could be explored, where that it tied the houses to the pub and the money to it, then I would have no problems in supporting it. On that note, I'm prepared to second Councillor Turner's proposal with great vigour. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew, would you like to come back in, please, Planning Officer?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, two comments really, which probably addressed to all the members who've spoken. That the applicant has come back very late in the day with the comments you see set out on page 1 and page 2 of the additional letters. What they've proposed raises the question of A, how it would actually work in practice, and B, you know, if it is put into practice, will it actually be effective in terms of supporting the pub in financial terms? So if there's a motion for deferral here, then I think the appropriate thing to do would be to put the onus on the applicant to actually demonstrate, or they'd probably have to submit an additional report just showing how this would actually work in practice and that there is a prospect of the scheme being viable. So if there is a move for deferral, Chairman, my suggestion to the committee is that the deferral is for that reason, to give the applicant the opportunity to address those points.
Okay. Kim, is there anything you wish to add? Please.
No, thank you, Chair. I think it's just what Andrew said, really. We need to make sure that even if this was deferred, then basically the monies made would be sufficient to generate a sufficient return to get the pub open and refurbished in any event.
Yeah.
And that the actual proposals of tying the dwellings to an obligation via a Section 106 agreement, for example, would actually work, because I understand that whoever's carrying out the development of the houses would be someone different to whoever's developing the pub.
Okay, thank you.
We just need to get something that's workable, would have to be agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Turner, you want to come back?
Yes, thank you, Chair. David Turner, Much Wenlock. In seeking some kind of proposal from the applicant, can we please encourage them, or indeed demand, that we understand what would happen if the pub didn't succeed? I mean, I don't wish it to fail, but it would be helpful to have a scenario which set out what would be the situation if they built 3 houses, sold on the open market, money goes into the pub, and 2 years later we're looking at the pub being closed again. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew, do you want to come back?
Yeah, actually, I'll just pick up on that last point if I can, Chairman. I think that's absolutely a valid point, and I think that's a sort of third strand I think that we need to ask the applicant to address. The only other point I was going to make, Chair, was really the point that Kim made, is that if there is a viable way to make this work, and the applicant can come forward and demonstrate there's a viable scheme, then, as Kim said, we'd have to enshrine this in a 106 agreement, because it involves things that we can't deal with by condition, i.e. money. So ultimately, if there is something here, then the application will come back to committee, and we'd have to be looking at approval subject to a section 106 agreement, if there's scope to make the project work. Okay, all right.
Thank you. Right, we now have a proposal on the table for a deferment of the application, second in two places by Councillor Simon Harris and Councillor Matt Shinton. Could I ask Kim to take the voting, please, for a deferral of the application?
Okay, thank you, Chair. So as Chair just confirmed, we're now voting for a deferral of the application subject to the points made. And can I just remind again, only those members present for the whole item can vote. So if I read out each member's name, can you confirm whether you're voting for or against the proposal, please? Councillor Evans?
For the proposal of deferment.
Councillor Turner?
For.
Councillor Boddington?
For.
Councillor Harris?
For.
Councillor Hignett?
For.
Councillor Motley?
For.
Councillor Parsons?
For.
Councillor Shinton?
For.
And Councillor Woodward?
For.
Thank you. That's unanimous, Chair.
That's carried unanimous. Thank you very much, committee, for that. We can move on now to the next application, which is Ginny Hall, Prescott, Clibber Mortimer. Could I have the officer report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Richard Force, your principal planner.
Can I just interrupt for a second and ask if Robert Tyndall's back, please?
Oh, yeah. You must have fell asleep.
Another call of nature.
Has he heard us, Chairman?
No.
Chairman, might I suggest that you shout his name out?
Councillor Robert Tyndall.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I'm here.
You're there. Okay. Right.
Beg your pardon. Sorry.
Right. We've got the next application, the Ginny Hall. I've asked Richard Ford to present the application, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just draw members' attention to the update sheet that we received yesterday with some additional comments on. The proposal before us here is for a rural workers dwelling associated with the Ginny Hall Outdoor Recreation Activity Centre. If I perhaps run through the slides initially. Next one, please, Tim. This shows the Ginny Hall site, and the proposed dwelling unit is the sort of the mustard-coloured rectangle we can see on the plan. Grouped around it to the right, it's a consent that's been given for some accommodation pods for users of the centre in that sort of arc shape there. And then the two white rectangles to the left of the coloured one, those are office and accommodation blocks that have been moved from the Old Vicarage Activity Centre to this location with a 2019 consent. And the other buildings are associated with the activities at the centre, particularly in terms of forces that are kept at that location. And as I say, this shows the portion in red shows the portion of the site to which this proposal for the the overall occupational dwelling relates, and in blue is the other land that's under the control of the applicants. You just perhaps move to the next slide, please. Yeah, in terms of the location, it is the blue land shows extending northeastwards is the access track to the site, which then joins with the public highway at the northern end, and to the north is the village of Sotterston. Next slide, please. This is the elevation of the proposed unit that's proposed for it as the workers' dwelling. Similar in style to the office block and the accommodation blocks that have been moved to the site from the Vicarage Activity Centre in the village. So that's our front and rear elevation view. Next one, please. Again, side view, so like a timber log cabin style. Next one, please. Indication of the floor plan. You can indicate sort of the kitchenette, dining area, and the sort of bedroom arrangement. Next slide, please. Yeah, in terms of the context of the site, which I cover aerial views. If we look at the bottom of this page, we can see just above the word Google, you see part of yes, that where the cursor is, that is the area and location that we are, the application was proposing the dwelling unit. And again shows our buildings that are down there, very inconspicuously grouped against that woodland at a lower level. And we can see the lane access extending northwards. And if we can perhaps go to the next slide. This shows the site in the context of Sotterston village. So again, the cursor is where currently we can see now is where the application site is. We can track the access road again northwards where it joins the public highway, and then northwards there is the village, and the previous which members recall the Vicarage Activity Centre and the application we had last year for the use of that building for a say residential training centre. That essentially is where we see that sort of cluster of woodland in the village there. If we can go back into the site plan. Great, thank you. So as set out in the report, this is a resubmission of an application which was refused in September 2020 on the grounds that there was not a functional need to provide permanent residential accommodation on site 24/7 to provide for animal welfare and for the management and security of the business. There's additional supporting information that's been submitted within the application, which has been set out in paragraphs 1.3 and 1.4 of the committee report, and obviously also on the update sheets that members have received. We're back to the principle that all applications have to be determined in accordance with the adopted development plan, unless there are other material considerations that warrant a different conclusion. Where rural occupational dwellings are proposed, the applicants are required to demonstrate the need and the benefit for the proposed development. This proposal would be what we call a primary dwelling to serve the enterprise. And we got to look at our standard plan policy MD7A, which sets out the criteria to be satisfied. And paragraph 6.1.2 of the committee report sort of gives those details. This plan policy is consistent with the National Planning Policy Framework. And the key consideration here is that the need must be essential and not just simply desirable or more convenient for the applicant. It is also the needs to the enterprise which must be considered and given the most weight, and not the personal circumstances. Should an essential need be accepted, then our policy MD7A requires that the erection of a new build dwelling should be the last resort, after consideration as to whether there are existing accommodational buildings which could meet that need. In respect to the functional need here, officers remain unconvinced that there is an essential need for a permanent dwelling on this site, for the reasons which are explained in the report. There is office and course accommodation on site which could be additionally be used for on-site security measures and presence. And as the report sets out, the wealth to consider animal welfare does not in itself mean it's essential that there should be a dwelling on site. In respect of the viability, because again, in terms of the functional and financial tests to be applied, which used to be enshrined in the government PPS 7 document, but is still very much good practice that's followed, there's a need for the businesses to demonstrate long-term viability as well, where we are looking at granting a permanent consent for a dwelling. So on the viability side of issues, it appears in this case the business enterprise is reliant upon the consultancy element of these three strands of business, and that is one that really doesn't have an essential requirement to be actually based at the Uni Hall location. So against the functional and financial tests that we as officers are obliged to assess these proposals, where it's come forward for a permanent dwelling, essentially one that's going to be there for a lifetime, as it were, it's not one where we feel that the case has been proven to justify that. Just as a point of reference to members, that in the event that the members did consider there to be an essential need here, our policy would require there to be a Section 106 agreement associated with any grants of approval, which would effectively secure a contribution to affordable housing in the event of the occupancy condition ever being lifted in the future. As a primary dwelling, it would be that financial payment rather than as a secondary dwelling, like if there's already an existing dwelling serving this holding and then another one was needed. In those situations, the secondary dwelling would default to be an affordable property. That would not apply in this particular case. So it remains really as to whether the committee considered that on the basis of the information supplied by the applicants in this case, whether there is an essential requirement for dwelling on site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. David Evans, Speaker. I'm just going to ask the solicitor to read any speakers' statements and whatever, and then Robert Tyndall will wish to come and ask a technical question. So, Kim, please, if you read the speakers' letters, please.
Thank you, Chair. The first one is from Duncan Turner, who says, for more than a decade, I've worked for the Eddie's Davis family in an ever-evolving role, from an outdoor pursuits instructor, first aid instructor to cook. Now the companies have moved to Ginny Hole. One of the implicit concerns was how to keep it safe, not purely for the company's considerable investment in assets, but for guests staying overnight on site, and also the welfare of animals in the fields and stables. With the forced sale of the old vicarage, the only way they could provide sufficient cover to these concerns is for the family or manager to live on site, as accommodation close to Ginny Hole is ridiculously difficult to find and price prohibitive. To successfully run the business, there needs to be supervision to the ongoing concerns, whether this be members of staff staying over to care for pony camps or simply offering a deterrent to the increasing criminal activities in the area. During my time with the Eddie's Davises, I have worked with a great many of the local residents and more recently the children of those residents, offering a much needed income, particularly during the summer months. These opportunities have often led to the start of new careers, as attested to with the amount of ex-employees working throughout the globe in the outdoor business. Clients have previously travelled from all over the UK to enjoy their experiences offered by their businesses, and without having an on-site supervision at their Ginny Hole location, their experiences and safety will be compromised, as will the long-term staff employment, including my own. Our next chair is Councillor Mad Shington, local member, and I've been asked to read this out on her behalf.
Thank you.
1. This outdoor activity business has evolved during the last 50 years plus. 2. Originally based at the old vicarage, Stotterston, which soon spread and morphed into the old vicarage activity centre, including the equestrian activities at the Ginny Hole site. 3. A key strand to the business has been educating groups of young and professional people with physical and safety activities. 4. Sessions are held for riding for the disabled over many years. 5. Providing training for public sector frontline staff, e.g. fire and rescue training. 6. Exactly fits with the health and wellbeing agenda. 7. Thrust of business changed with training often requested on sites elsewhere. 8. Overnight camping conditions, one of the sessions currently offered. 9. It became obvious that practically there was no need to use both sites. The equestrian Ginny Hole with the stable and menage complex, training room and camping site facilities and staff required to provide care became the main site. 10. The overheads needed to be substantially reduced and the sale of the old vicarage would stabilise debt and provide some capital to enhance the Ginny Hole site. 11. Currently, a number of staff are furloughed, with the horses being cared for by family and 1 or 2 staff. 12. Bookings are being taken for later this year, hopefully to reopen. 13. The site is used as a base for 2 other family businesses who provide training exhibitions off-site. 14. Public footpath through the site is well used and never caused concern to walkers, indeed provides an insight to rural-based businesses. 15. Local complaints of excessive traffic movements, lights and noise at night will be addressed by the siting of a residential unit. 16. The economic ripple effects are a major plus. The economic ripple effects are a major plus for the local area, which will be needed when leisure opens up again. I wholly support this application and urge colleagues to permit. And next, Chair, we've got Moss Company, who is the agent on behalf of the applicants.
Thank you.
Who states, the application before the committee is the culmination of a lot of careful consideration and preparation by the applicants as part of a long-term programme of improvements to augment the 3 businesses that use this site. Although the businesses have used the application site for over 25 years for the same purpose, the residential school groups, pony club camps and seminars previously took place at the village centre a minute's drive from the site. This inevitably caused constant movement between the 2 centres and also duplication of resources and deemed wasteful for the long-term successful future of the businesses. As a consequence, consent was approved 19-00815 full to move the residential and seminar side of the business and all equipment to the application site. Subsequent to this, the original village residential centre and home of the applicants was sold, the financial position reconsolidated and the monies ploughed back into the improvement of Ginny Hole, which is now the central hub of all operations. With enhancement of the facilities and the relocation of the residential element, as well of course the essential care for the equestrian centre, it was always intended as part of the plan to ensure accommodation for a manager's dwelling, hence the application under review by this committee. This is no more than a modest chalet of 97 metres squared, which is smaller than the affordable dwelling and not some ambitious mansion. Despite supplying comprehensive and exhaustive evidence, both statistically and financially, the applicants have been told by the planning authority that contrary to generally accepted national and local guidelines, they have not shown a proven need for accommodation. The businesses have been in existence for 37 years, including the old vicarage site, and 25 years at Ginny Hole, so this is not speculative. Having granted the accommodation pods, the established pony club camps and school activities with unaccompanied children need an adult on site 24/7. The site was awarded a substantial European grant in reflection of the contribution the businesses make to the rural community. The employment of 11 local staff would be in jeopardy, including the benefits to tourism in the much wider community. The parish council fully support the proposal. Letters of support include industry regulators, employees, local facilities and activity users. No statutory consultee objected to the application. The site is well concealed and not prominent, and although an open countryside is substantially screened by trees, so visual impact is not an issue. The relocation of the former centre means the internal traffic movements have been reduced to 0. The devastating effect of C19 on tourism, this application should surely be supported to secure livelihoods and beyond just the applicants. In short, this is no more than a long-term tourist-based business looking to do no more than rationalise, whereas the reaction of the planning authority has been akin to approving a vaccine but banning the distribution. We ask the committee to let sense prevail.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That's everyone, is it? Right, Councillor Tyndall, you wish to ask a technical question to Richard Fortune. Please go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just looking at page 70. proposal 1.1, it says that the previous planning application was refused on the 8th of September. Was that under delegated powers, or I don't remember it coming to committee? That's the only thing.
Thank you, Richard. Fortunately, that was under delegated powers.
It was.
It was, yes.
Right. So this is the first time the committee have had to consider the possibility of living accommodation at this site.
In recent times, yes, obviously the report does give details of an application many years ago, but yes, you're correct. This is the first time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Right, Richard, is there any comments you want to make from the speaker's notes or anything before I open it up to committee?
Only observation, Chair, that in terms of the planning officer's assessment, I think as set out in the report, we have adhered to the national guidance in terms of our judgment. It's clearly for members to weigh up the considerations themselves here, but no, I wouldn't suggest, as the agent implied, that we are doing anything different here to any application for a rural occupational dwelling in the countryside.
Okay, thank you. Right, I will now open it up for committee's comments, please, and I see Simon Harris wishes to speak first. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just one thing, this business is an age-old business. It's been 50 years in the development of a business like this. I mean, and it's still going and still expanding and still wanting to move on. You can understand why they need somebody on the site now. I think I'm going to go against officers on this and ask for this committee to support an application for the to have it built.
Thank you. Councillor Robert Tyndall, please. Councillor Tyndall.
Yes, I'm coming. Thank you, Chairman. I support Simon Harris. I'm not sure that he's actually made a proposal, but if he has, I would second it. It is a very long way, as the Google Earth extract showed, from the road, Stotterston to Bagginswood Road. And I would think that they would definitely need someone on site to supervise all the activities that are going. And of course, since the last year's planning application was turned down, they've sold the sort of headquarters of their business. So I'm definitely in favour of this application being approved. And if Simon has proposed it, I'm happy to second it. If he hasn't, then I'm happy to propose it.
Thank you. Councillor Nick Hindit, please.
Thank you, Chair. On page 72, 1.7, it mentions all about the planning permission that was granted. 2 timber cabins, reception, training accommodation, parking area, septic tank, 6 accommodation pods, all that sort of thing. In my opinion, with all that planning that was granted, the natural progression after 25 years on this site would be a cabin to provide 24/7 management. They have 11 staff. They hold adventure camps for unaccompanied children, all of which are good reasons to need somebody on there 24/7. I tend to disagree with the officer's suggestion that the office there on site could be used for residential use, even occasionally. I wouldn't like to try and spend too many nights in a bunk bed there. Although I know they've got accommodation pods. MD7A suggests that dwellings for essential rural workers should only be permitted if relevant financial and functional tests are met. Well, again, I tend to disagree with the officer. I think the functional tests have been met. The business is viable. The cost of the dwelling would be funded by the business. I think the scale of the proposed chalet is probably proportionate to the scale of the business. I think access to the site down a stony track into this isolated area is actually perfect for the type of business. It's not the sort of access road where you would want to look at improving it. So I think that part of it would be okay. I just want to mention about burglar alarms and CCTV, because I've got both protecting my business I do live right by the business, and when my alarm goes off, which it does sometimes, often false alarms, hopefully, you need to be alert and on the site within 30 to 60 seconds, in my opinion, even in the middle of the night, to see if something is going on. So I don't agree that somebody could find some alternative accommodation perhaps half a mile away and be expected to respond in a time that would actually achieve anything at all. I think you need to be on site. And so for that reason, I'm in favour of this application, and I would be voting for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tony Parsons, please.
I don't disagree with what the previous two councillors have said, but I guess just looking at this accommodation that's being proposed, it's the issue, I guess, as to whether it's there for someone to look after the site and the proceedings, or whether it's more a case of becoming a new family home rather than simply someone there to provide security on the site and look after the animals and whatever. That's my only query, because of the size of it being a 3-bedroom property. You know, I'm just not sure on that aspect, but I do understand that it is quite appropriate to have someone there to make sure that this thing functions properly.
Thank you. Any other speakers, please? Right, Councillor Harris, you made a proposal. Could you come back with your proposal, please? And then Councillor Tyndall, I wish to second it. So.
Chair, Councillor Turner has indicated he wishes to speak.
All right. Yeah, Councillor Turner, you want to come in first? Councillor Turner.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Thank you, Chairman. David Turner, Much Wenlock. I have to say that whilst I was impressed by the plea put forward by the applicants, and indeed I've listened to colleagues, I'd have to say that I didn't find it wholly convincing. Without a doubt, the business is doing some great work, but I don't see, I'm afraid, that it would necessarily change my view that actually the officer recommendation was justified. I have significant experience over very many years of running businesses which require burglar alarms, intruder alarms, where many tens of thousands of pounds are at stake. And whilst I can understand Councillor Hignett's concern to want to be 30 or 60 seconds away, you know, I'm the key holder for someone fairly locally, and I wouldn't even have my socks on in 30 seconds. So I have to say, I'm sorry, I'm unconvinced. I have a good deal of sympathy with the business, which I think is doing a great job, but I'm not sure about the reasons. But I was on the point of withdrawing at the point you were about to get going, Chairman, but I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Richard Fortune, please. If you want to come back, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Richard Fortune, Principal Planner. Just in terms, obviously aware that members have moved approval here. Just to reiterate that obviously we would hope that would be subject to delegated authority to officers to attach appropriate planning conditions, and for the Section 106 agreement that our policy MD7A requires in respect to the affordable housing situation, and obviously to ensure that there's not a condition that links this dwelling to this particular business. Thank you.
I think you lost my screen. Hello? Hello? Hello?
We can hear you, David.
You can, right.
Yeah.
Could Councillor Harris please come back, please, with his proposal?
Yes, sir, I am here. And yes, I propose that we go against officers' recommendation and approve the build of a, what can I call it, country workers dwelling.
Okay, and that's seconded by Councillor Tyndall.
It is, yes, thank you.
Right, could I ask the solicitor to put that to the vote, please? Or does Richard Fortune want to come back with any comments, please?
Again, Chair, no, just my previous comment is showing that it is a delegated authority for conditions and 106 to officers.
Okay, is that right, Simon?
Yes, yes.
Right.
Yeah, I confirm. Okay with that too.
Thank you. Could I ask Kim Brown, the solicitor, to put the vote to the committee, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. So we've got a proposal and a seconder to approve the application against officers' recommendation, but with a delegation to officers in relation to conditions and the Section 106 agreement for affordable housing and linking the occupancy to the business.
Okay.
I just remind members again that only those present for the whole item can vote. And if you could please indicate whether you're for or against the proposal. Councillor Evans.
For.
Councillor Turner.
Against.
Councillor Boddington.
For.
Councillor Harris.
For.
Councillor Hignett.
For.
Councillor Mockley.
Against.
Councillor Parsons.
Abstain.
Councillor Tyndall.
For.
And Councillor Woodward.
Against.
We've got 5 for the proposal, 3 against and 1 abstention.
So that proposal is carried for a dwelling on this site. Thank you, committee. We now move on to the list of appeals and appeal decisions, please.
Thank you, Chair. Richard Fortune, Principal Planner. I've got 3 to report. All appeals are dismissed. The first one's an outline application for 5 dwellings on land at New Road, Orton, which is delegated refusal. Orton's a cluster settlement. The inspector agreed with the council that the proposal would not comprise limited infilling, and a standard plan policy clearly relates to infilling by single dwellings and not single plots where more than one dwelling could be built. The modest exceedance of the settlement guideline added weight to the dismissal, but was not a reason in itself to justify refusal, he concluded. But its final decision that the proposal would not accord with our location requirements of the adopted local plan policy. The second case is a proposal for demolition of a building and erection of a 2-storey dwelling at Upper Bronson Farm, Wheat Hill. Another delegated refusal. The main issue there is whether the proposed development would be a suitable site for a dwelling in a community cluster. The inspector acknowledged that the development would be close to existing development and would not encroach into countryside, but it would not be an infill in a gap between existing development and therefore not constitute infill. So in a sense, again, it was against the standard policy guidelines and the limited benefits to rural economy, and the use of previously developed land didn't carry sufficient weight to override that planning and policy housing objection. And finally, we got an appeal decision on it's got a Class Q notification. It's for a conversion of farm buildings to dwellings under a prior notification procedure. This is at Terrace Farm, Crumpton. The inspector noted that the building here was relatively lightweight and insubstantial. He decided with the council the extent of works needed would be significant, amounting effectively to a rebuild, creating a new building around a conversion, going beyond what's allowed by Class Q permitted own rights. Of note, he basically acknowledged the structural report that the applicants were provided, but that did not alter his opinion in this case. And that is an example that we're finding in a number of cases now, that these applications are accompanied by structural reports, but they are not necessarily looking at whether the scheme can actually be converted rather than just observation on the building in its present form. So it's quite useful for officers to see that support from the planning inspectorate on that particular detail. And that's it for today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. That brings us to conclude the agenda for today. I'd like to thank Kim Brown, our solicitor, for everything she's done. I'd like to thank Tracy Dark for sitting in on the committee and learning what it's all about. And I'd like to thank the officers for such excellent reports and Google photographs. And I'd like to thank the committee for all their input. And I think we've had a good afternoon, a good debate. And thank you, everyone. and our next meeting will be held on Tuesday the 16th of March at 2 o'clock. I wish you all a safe journey and thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chair.
Chairman.
I'll try and make a safe journey into the next